why should we apply to IPOs? How should we evaluate to IPOs?
ये जो कैपेसिटी यूटिलाइजेशन ये लोग जो डेटा देता है, इस डेटा का क्या सैनिटी है? तो झूठ लिख सकता है क्या?
Hyundai में 82% स्टेक है एंड पीपल फिर भी बैशिंग आउट. इसमें एक पॉइंट और था कि लोग बोल रहे थे कि आईपीओ आने से पहले ही कैसे डिविडेंड लिया सारा.
Well, how is that a issue कि dividend निकाल लिया? There are a lot of AI platforms. I mean, the notebook.llm is one of the most used one these days. So do you think value in using it for this purpose, or you still are old school and want to read every text? Hello, welcome to another Face2Face, and this time it's about investing, and particularly it's about IPO investing. Friends, I had a privilege today that I recorded Face2Face with 4 market professionals who have been tracking IPOs for many years now and who have kind of decoded the art and science of studying IPOs. This is going to be very interesting. We have already recorded the video with all 4 of them. What I saw is that the knowledge is so rich, so full of depth, that I requested them that let this be the part 1 and we are going to record part 2 as well. They were so generous and they accepted. So in this video, it's going to be part 1 of IPO Masterclass. And seriously, it's a masterclass you will not see anywhere else. And the second part will be released probably the next Friday after the release of this video. So enjoy yourself. It's a long video, but I'm sure you'll find a lot of value in learning if you are at all an IPO investor or if you intend to become an IPO investor. So let's welcome all 4 of them here. Hello, welcome Sunday Investing Group. How are you guys doing?
Doing very well.
Yeah, good, Vivek. How are you?
Fantastic. So excited to record this one. This is face-to-face roundtable and I never had any chance to record with so many people together. तो बहुत मजा आने वाला है. जबरदस्त.
It will be interesting for us as well. हमारे लिए भी पहली बार है कि we are actually on video. We are kind of used to doing spaces which are more of audio. So this is a very interesting space for us as well. Thank you so much for inviting us to do this.
Thank you for giving your time and commitment that you are going to share everything with us, because I've been hearing with you guys for some time now on Twitter Space, और आपका YouTube channel भी है जिसमें आप knowledge share करते हैं. तो and genuine YouTube channel है. You are not an influencer, I know. तो thank you. I'm sure we'll have good learning together. तो आज हमारा topic है IPO, everything about IPO. करना है नहीं करना है, कैसे करना है, evaluate कैसे करना है, everything we are going to discuss. So before that, I want you guys to talk about yourself. All of you are quite young like me, younger probably. So let's know more about you guys. So would you like to introduce each other? That will be great. And then we get into a very good presentation which is now available with us while we discuss. So introduction हो जाए.
So maybe एक काम करते हैं, मैं एक बार अपनी पीपीटी पुल अप कर देता हूँ. I'll talk a bit about Sunday investing. उसके बाद उसमें हमारा इंट्रोडक्शन का सेक्शन है. So all of us can individually हम अपने आप को इंट्रोड्यूस कर देंगे और उसके बाद डेक पे और थोड़ी फॉर्मल बोरिंग बातें करेंगे. So just introduction is always good. So let me just share my screen and then take it forward from there. So again, काफी फैंसी सा हमने नाम दिया, good, bad and ugly of primary markets, just to catch everyone's attention. But again, want to highlight a few things before we get started. We are novices. Think of us as friends talking about, people have different hobbies, right? We just have a hobby of being interested in the markets. तो markets की बात करते हैं, उसमें क्या चल रहा है ये करते हैं, but we are not SEBI registered research analysts. None of our opinion is qualified opinion. So anything that we are going to talk in this deck will remain just our opinion, and definitely everyone, if someone's following, if we take a few names, good, bad, whatever, just take them with a pinch of salt and do your own research. This can only act as a additional layer of what you should be doing, but end of the day आपको अपना research खुद से करना है. And again, this is a disclaimer which I wanted to add. With that, maybe I can just move forward and talk about introduction, where we so how we are going to do is we'll do it in 4 sections. First section is introduction. We'll talk about what IPOs have done in 2024. Second sections would be कि आईपीओ काम कैसे करता है, क्या फ्रेश इशू होता है, क्या ओएफएस होता है, एसएमई आईपीओ क्या होता है. वील अंडरस्टैंड अ बिट ऑफ डेफिनेशंस. Second, third section would probably be the most interesting one, which would be कि इवेल्युएट कैसे करते हैं आईपीओ को. इतने सारे आईपीओ आते हैं, उसमें लोग इतना डर जाते हैं कि 300 पेज का डीआरएचपी है, कैसे पढूं उसको. सो विल काइंड ऑफ वी विल टॉक अबाउट हाउ टू डू दैट, एंड देन द फोर्थ सेक्शन वुड बी टुवर्ड्स how do IPOs get listed, and then what are some of the post-listing opportunities which some people can get per se. But with that, maybe what we'll do is, हम जैसा आपने मेरे को क्वेश्चन बोला था, I haven't forgotten that yet. I'll come back to our introductions. Before that, just want to highlight कि Sunday investing बना कैसे. जैसा मैंने बताया, so sometime around 2024 last year, June, Rohit and Tanmay used to be very active on Chittorgarh, which is a very famous IPO प्लेटफॉर्म पोर्टल पर से, जहां पे हर कंपनी का रिव्यूज होता है और लोग अपने कमेंट्स डालते हैं कि इस कंपनी में मुझे ये अच्छा लग रहा है, इस कंपनी में ये इंटरेस्टिंग पॉइंट है. सो इट्स अ पोर्टल. वहां पे रोहित एंड तन्मय यूज्ड टू शेयर देयर ओपिनियंस क्वाइट एक्टिवली, एंड आई यूज्ड टू साइलेंटली लिंगर अराउंड, देखता रहता था कि क्या चल रहा है. सो आई रीच्ड आउट टू Rohit and Tanmay, and back in the moment we saw that there were a lot of spaces happening on Twitter, but those spaces were मोर ऑफ टू वे डायरेक्शनल, जहाँ पे लोग अपनी बातें कर रहे हैं, और इट वाज मोर ऑफ अ फन, लाइक वो क्लब हाउस वाला जैसा एनवायरमेंट है कि बस फॉर द लैक ऑफ अ बेटर वर्ड बकर चल रही है, लाइक एक दूसरे से बात कर रहे हैं. सो वी वांटेड टू कीप इट मोर टाइट, जहाँ पे हम बस अपनी कंपनियों की बात कर रहे हैं और उसमें क्या होगा, क्या तुम कंपनी में आईपीओ में लगा रहे हो, इसमें नहीं लगा रहे हो. एंड अगेन वी वर गोइंग थ्रू अ ह्यूज बुल मार्केट, राइट. सो वी स्टार्टेड पिकिंग अप कंपनीज के नेक्स्ट वीक आईपीओ किसका होगा. जो कंपनीज का आईपीओ है, बी इट मेन बोर्ड और एसएमई, विल पिक अप ऑल ऑफ देम, डिवाइड अमंगस्ट आवरसेल्फ, एंड देन टॉक अबाउट द गुड्स एंड बैड्स ऑफ दोस कंपनीज की ये चीज हमें इंटरेस्टिंग लग रही है, ये चीज हमें नहीं समझ में आ रही है, ये मेरी स्ट्रेटेजी होने वाली है अगले हफ्ते के लिए. दैट्स हाउ रोहित एंड तन्मय काइंड ऑफ जॉइंड, एंड देन यश जॉइंड लेटर व्हेन तन्मय हैड हिज एग्जाम्स इन बिटवीन. ही वाज काइंड ऑफ ऑक्यूपाइड फॉर सम टाइम, तो यश को हम ले आए. सो दैट्स हाउ द फोर ऑफ अस. हैविंग सेड दैट, वी डोंट हैव अ पेड चैनल, वी डोंट हैव अ पेड मेंबरशिप, एवरीथिंग, एंड along those lines, all of our opinions are what we feel is happening in the markets, and we kind of just share it with people कि हमारा ये ओपिनियन है, इसको ऐसा पढ़ना चाहिए, इस आईपीओ को ऐसे देखना चाहिए. बट अगेन open to, like, we are wrong a lot of times as well, and we are also learning in the process. With that, maybe Rohit, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? We'll introduce ourselves in this order.
Thanks a lot, Manish. I'll just add one more thing. I think the other trigger when we started was, and it's something that still happens today also, is a lot of IPOs, people judge based on this concept of this gray market premium, which is this unknown thing that trades somewhere. For most people, they don't even know what it is. But on some website, there'll be a gray market premium number. And people will assume that that reflects the true value of the company and reflects what it might list at. And that was a gap and an alpha that we saw. And when you actually study something fundamentally, you can critically assess whether that gray market premium makes sense or not. And quite often it would, quite often it wouldn't. And that is where we found that opportunity. And then as we used to, like Manish said, we used to post some of these reviews. There used to be good traction on that. And then we kind of made it a thing. And then we've been doing this, week on week. I'll get down to introducing myself. So I'm Rohit. Very happy to, to be here and to chat with you, Vivek. Just quickly on my background, I am an engineer by education. I passed out of IIT Madras back in 2011. I spent some time in consulting. I spent some time in venture capital. That's probably my first entry into the markets in some way, though obviously it was the private markets. I then started my own company in 2015. This was an e-commerce startup. We raised a decent amount of money, finally exited in 2019. I took a little bit of a break after that. That was when COVID also happened. I then kind of pursued my passion, and I joined one of the IPL franchises in a business role. I spent the last few years there. I left last year with a view to do my own thing again. A couple of years ago is when I really got into the market, I would say, more than just on the side, or more than just putting money into large caps or into index funds and so on. My investing journey before that, I would say, was mostly large caps, mid caps, and some tech companies. I've done some angel investments, but I was never actively into the market the way I am today. 2 years back is when I think I got introduced to IPOs. I got one random allotment for an IPO that I just applied without really knowing too much about it, and it listed, I think it was NetWeb, and it listed at like, it just basically listed at 2x. I took the money, I was very happy. And then a little while later, I saw that it net worth itself is up 3x from where it listed. Of course, after that, things have moved, things have changed quite a bit with this current market. But firstly, getting that allotment triggered something, and the fact that there's some maths and there's some science there. So that is what made me really interested. And then went deep into main boards, into SMEs, into how to improve your probability, then how to actually study the company. Should you exit on listing, not exit on listing? So all of those things came slowly. But I think we've been doing this now very actively for 2 years. So this IPO market, just looking at all the nuances, what is gray market premium, who are flippers, like there's so many different things you learn once you do this. And that's how I kind of got into it. And now I'm obviously very active, even though there are no actual IPOs right now, but obviously much more active in the market as a whole.
Lovely. Good to know you, Rohit. Amazing.
Thanks, Vivek.
I think we can request Tanmay to introduce himself. Tanmay?
Hello.
Yes, Tanmay. How are you?
So, myself, Tanmay, very happy to be on your podcast. That is also my first ever podcast I'm doing. So,
Nice.
I started markets in like 2020 end. I started with some very popular companies like Tata Motors, Kalyan Jeweler, this Arvind Fashions and all that. Then when the COVID started in 2021, I saw like few IPOs coming together. Like that time used to be someone like MTAR Technologies, Lakshmi Organic, and something like Paras Defense. So all this IPOs came in, and like I was very fascinated towards looking these very new companies. And if you just see what names I took was, they were very very unique businesses. So what I saw is that such a businesses are not available in the already listed market. So this was before like I'm getting the basic stuff towards like what is markets, what are large caps, what are mid caps, what are the sectors that that knowledge I had already garnered. But after that, when I saw this very very new and unique companies coming in, I got fascinated towards the IPO segment. So I started analyzing the IPOs in 2021. I would say mid or early to mid 2021. My first IPO analyzed was MTAR Technologies. Then like almost, but that time I did not invested in IPOs, but just studied them. I had like small investments from like 2021, but my first I went completely in a major IPO thing was Campus Activewear in 2022. I would say in early 2022. From I would say the whole IPO journey for me has been very, very good. Uh, I've spotted some very, very unique kind of companies. And then I would say till date, I have studied like 200 to 250 main board IPOs. And I would say almost double of that in the SME segment. And almost 80 to 90% of this 250 main board IPOs, I would say 200 to 250, I have read the RHP in depth. And in even some cases, I've got opportunities to talk with the management via whatever sources. Like sometime it would be IPO related calls. Sometime it would be some other way around. So this IPO segment got me into it, and then I saw that there is a big potential happening in the whole country, because India never saw more than 15 or 20 or 25 IPOs in a year, before 2022. But since that, the IPO boom has been on the peak, and we have seen more and more public offerings coming on the bourses. So what we see is that there are some very very unique companies which are not available in the already listed space. And after reading the IPOs, we can also understand that which are the new trends, which are the new sectors, what are the upcoming themes, and we are also able to generate lot of information from various sectors. So there are many investors in the secondary market who have good hold over X sector. Like someone is very good in banking, someone is very good in technology, someone is very good in IT, someone is very good in pharma. But there are very less people who are good in, I would say, 80% of sectors. But a person who is more into IPOs has the opportunities to track and study various sectors and very very unique companies. So that fascinated me towards getting into it, and this is my overall a small introduction from my part.
Lovely. So we have this IIT Baba and we have IPO Baba also in India now. Baba who reads so many DRHPs and ही इज फुल ऑफ कंटेंट इनसाइड हिम. अभी इनसे बाबा से निकलवाना पड़ेगा, वो मेरा काम है. देखता हूँ मैं कितना निकलवाता हूँ. All right, so here we are. Yash, we would love to know more about you.
Hello, Vivek. First of all, thanks for hosting this. So my introduction, or say my story, is very basic, which is in every commerce graduate. I was studying commerce, BCom honors finance. तो तभी से होता है एक बहुत पैशनेट फाइनेंस बंदे का कि आफ्टर कॉलेज आई वांट टू एंटर इनटू इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंकिंग साइड, आई वांट टू एंटर इनटू प्राइवेट इक्विटी वीसी फर्म्स. तो वहां से आई वाज मोर इंक्लाइन टुवर्ड्स एंटरिंग इनटू अ प्रॉपर बाय साइड IB रोल, जिसके लिए आई वाज प्रिपेयरिंग ऑल दिस एंड आई वाज ट्रैकिंग मार्केट्स फ्रॉम माय कॉलेज टाइम. उसके बाद क्या हुआ कि आई गॉट अ जॉब फाइनेंस साइड में. इट वाज IBP सपोर्ट रोल. काफी अंडरस्टैंडिंग मिला कि हाउ थिंग्स वर्क्स इन अ पी स्पेस, VC स्पेस में कैसे काम होता है, हाउ वी मेक मॉडल्स, फाइनेंशियल मॉडलिंग कैसे करते हैं, कैसे तीनों स्टेटमेंट्स का लिंकेज होता है. तो वो ऑलरेडी अंडरस्टैंडिंग आ रहा था. उसके साथ साथ आई वाज मोस्टली इनटू स्टार्टिंग में HDFCs, IDFCs ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. तो मेरा मोस्टली इन्वेस्टमेंट उसमें था. स्टार्टिंग ऑफ माय जॉब रोल आई मेट 2-3 फ्रेंड्स जो वहां पे ऑलरेडी काम कर रहे थे. दे वर इन मैनेजर एंड VP पोस्ट पे. तो उनसे इंटरेक्शन के बाद आई गॉट टू नो कि ओके दिस इज माइक्रो कैप्स एंड दिस इज हाउ SME इन्वेस्टिंग वर्क्स. तो वहां से मेजॉरिटी ऑफ माय पोर्टफोलियो इन अ मंथ स्विच्ड टू प्रॉपर SME एंड प्रॉपर माइक्रो कैप स्टाइल. वहां से आई वाज वेरी एक्टिवली ट्रैकिंग. सो आई वर्कड 2 years. फिर उसके बाद आई लेफ्ट द ट्रेडिशनल रोल. अभी नाउ आई एम परस्यूइंग मार्केट्स फुल टाइम फॉर एन ईयर ऑलमोस्ट. तो मेरा इन्वेस्टमेंट स्ट्रैटेजी तो काफी सिंपल है. तो ये संडे इन्वेस्टिंग में देवर 3 people, मनीष, रोहित एंड तन्मय. मैं द 4th guy आई वाज जॉइंड वे लेटर, जब ये काफी चल चुका था, बिकॉज उस समय IPO की स्पीड्स काफी ज्यादा इंक्रीज हो चुकी थी. तो देवर 7-8 IPOs कमिंग इन अ वीक. तो मनीष भाई एंड रोहित भाई एंड तन्मय, वी ऑल आर कॉमन इन मेनी ऑफ द व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप्स एंड हम काफी रिसर्च वगैरह शेयर करते रहते हैं आपस में भी. तो उसमें से मनीष भाई रीच आउट टू मी कि लेट्स डू दिस. एंड तो आई वाज आल्सो लाइक कि हाँ ठीक है, चलो कुछ अच्छा करते हैं, कुछ नया करते हैं, कुछ सीख ही लेंगे रास्ते में कुछ गलत किया तो तब से आई ज्वाइन. एंड मोस्टली तो आई डोंट डू IPOs, आई ओनली ट्रैक पोस्ट लिस्टिंग अपॉर्चुनिटीज, बिकॉज वो जो वैल्यू गैप होता है वो लिस्टिंग में प्राइस डिस्कवरी ढंग से हो नहीं पाता है. तो आई ओनली डू इन्वेस्टिंग पोस्ट लिस्टिंग. बहुत रेयरली मैं कभी कभी IPO लगा देता हूँ. एंड उसमें भी माई इन्वेस्टिंग स्ट्रैटेजी इज वेरी सिंपल. आई गो फॉर बाइंग स्टॉक्स विच आर रीजनेबली प्राइस्ड विद अ डिसेंट ग्रोथ. तो जब तक ग्रोथ रहता है तब तक I am in the stock, and if growth goes away or the valuation gets stretched, I get out of the stock. So no hard feelings for any company or any stocks. It's just that my main focus is my IRR maximization.
Wow. Yash, what is your age, yeah?
I am 24 right now.
Almost half of me.
Yes.
God. 24 में तो पता ही नहीं था हमको करना क्या लाइफ में. Anyways, this is so amazing. This is new Bharat, I guess. Manish, I sincerely wish you are elder. हाँ, आप 24 के तो नहीं हो ना बॉस?
नहीं, I am not. I am somewhere in between Yash and you. I am 34 right now.
Okay. Yeah,
But yeah, so जैसा रोहित तन्मय यश ने अपने आप को इंट्रोड्यूस किया, मैं एक बैकग्राउंड दे देता हूँ. सो इंटरनली हमारी टीम में रोहित इज कॉल्ड द प्रोफेसर, बिकॉज उसका अगर आपने मनी हाइस्ट देखा हो, सो ही हैज अ वर्ड लाइक वेरी लिमिटेड इंफॉर्मेशन ही विल से, बट ही मेक श्योर इट इज द राइट थिंग. तन्मय इज कॉल्ड एनसाइक्लोपीडिया, क्योंकि उसको सब IPOs का, सब RHPs का सब पता होता है. And Yash is called the Jadugar because he knows what will happen in market more often than not. So that's how he kind of say our names are, and then I kind of bring all of us together. So just मैं अपना introduction दे देता हूँ. So I'm born and brought up in Bhopal. Did my engineering from here in IIT Bhopal, then worked for 4 years, and then went for my MBA to Indian School of Business, ISB Hyderabad. That's when the first formal inkling towards finance started. I was the GSB finance coordinator there, the student council wala jo finance coordinator, and got a job in finance. And for the last 6 years, I've been working with a firm, US based MNC, in their FP&A role, financial planning analysis. So my work role revolves around closing the books, creating balance sheets, creating accruals, etc. So मेरी ना स्टॉक्स की अंडरस्टैंडिंग समवेयर बैकवर्ड्स है. लोगों को क्या होता है, पहले वो प्राइस देखते हैं, प्राइस ट्रैक करते हैं, उसके बाद पीछे से फंडामेंटल्स पढ़ना चालू करते हैं. मेरे को क्या है, फंडामेंटल्स बिकॉज ऑफ माय जॉब रोल थोड़ा बहुत समझ में आने लगा. back in the day 2023 में, I remember again very similar to Rohit, one IPO applied. So उससे पहले मैं IPO अप्लाई करता रहता था. So I remember LIC वगैरह जब IPO हुआ था 2021 में, बट हमेशा ना वो 15,000 वाला टोकन अमाउंट रिटेल, क्योंकि हमें लगता है रिटेल है, हम तो रिटेल 15,000 वाला अलॉटमेंट लगाने आता था यूपीआई के थ्रू पर से, तो वो लगाते थे. तो उसमें गेन हो भी जाएगा तो कितना गेन हो जाएगा पर से. सो आई रिमेंबर 2023 अगस्त, आई वाज सिटिंग विद अ फ्रेंड, तब कहीं एक ग्रुप पे देखा था कि एचएनआई में तुम अप्लाई कर सकते हो. तो तब फर्स्ट टाइम आई रिमेम्बर एक अगस्त में आईपीओ आया था एरोफ्लेक्स करके, तो मैं कहा एक बार करके देखते हैं होता क्या है. सो आई पुट इन अ 10 लाख एप्लीकेशन एंड गॉट अ अलॉटमेंट. 2 लाख का अलॉटमेंट आता है एचएनआई में. तब तक पता भी नहीं था कि 10 में 2 आता है, क्या होता है. अगेन फिगर्ड आउट अलोंग द गो, बट वो अप्लाई किया एरोफ्लेक्स में एंड कोइंसिडेंटली अगेन गॉट दैट अलॉटमेंट और उसको डे 1 पे बेचा. एंड वो लाइक 100 रुपए का शेयर था. आई रिमेम्बर इट ओपन समवेयर अराउंड 160 रुपीज. तो 2 लाख का 3 बीच हो गया अचानक से. सो मैं कहा ये तो चीट कोड है कुछ, लाइक यहाँ कुछ तो चल रहा है. एंड देन सेकंड आईपीओ राइट आफ्टर दैट, द सेम वीक अप्लाइड विष्णु प्रकाश पुंगलिया, सेम मेन बोर्ड आईपीओ. वो भी इट वाज अ 108 रुपीज आईपीओ, समथिंग लाइक दैट, सेम रेंज, ओपन एट 160, अगेन सोल्ड इट. सो इन अ वीक मेड 2.5 लाख रुपीज. आई वाज लाइक कुछ तो चल रहा है यहाँ पे. लाइक either we don't understand the segment HNI कैसे operate करता है. And this is back in the day, August 2023. So there, we used to still get a lot of opportunities. And then towards 2024, क्या हुआ, allotments difficult होते गए because people just started knowing about these schemes. But back in the day, it was really easy to get allotments. So that's how I got involved. Started my formal lingering on चित्तौड़गढ़. चित्तौड़गढ़ में मैं देखता रहता था तन्मय क्या बोल रहा है, रोहित क्या बोल रहे हैं, और भी बहुत सारे लोग हैं वहां पे, वो क्या बोल रहे हैं. And that's how we started moving towards that journey. And then for the last 1.5 years, in June is when we first did our space, brought everyone together, we divide companies and then just like discuss our strategy कि इस company क्या होगा इस कंपनी में. काइंड ऑफ डिस्कस ऑल ऑफ दिस दोस एज वेल एंड वी हैव अ फ्यू क्विज आइटम्स फॉर यू. तो हमने कल जो डेक भेजा था और आज जो डेक भेजा है उसमें 2-3 स्लाइड एक्स्ट्रा ऐड किए, जहाँ पे हम आपसे पूछेंगे कि आप इवेल्युएट करोगे आईपीओ को तो क्या पॉइंट नोट करोगे. सो दैट वुड बी इंटरेस्टिंग, बट वी प्लान टू डू दैट. बट या, ओवर टू यू. अ लॉन्ग इंट्रोडक्शन, वी हैव टेकन लाइक 20 minutes already, but yeah, this is what all of us are about.
That's amazing, यार. And you just want to add here that एक तो नाम चेंज कर दो तन्मय का, make him IPO बाबा please. Just think about it. And the other thing is, जब मैं किसी के साथ वीडियो रिकॉर्ड करता हूँ तो टिपिकली एक 1 hour 1.5 1.25 रहता है. तो that's with one person. So you guys are 4. तो 4 घंटा चल सकता है ना, ये तो कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. हाँ, लेट इट बी. तो योर इंट्रोडक्शन डिजर्व्स टू बी लेंथी, सो इट्स एब्सोल्युटली फाइन बिकॉज ऑल ऑफ यू डिजर्व special attention. And the fact that you come from vivid background and the common passion of studying IPO, it's very difficult to get such kind of a passionate group together. So thank you so much guys for giving me an opportunity to host you guys and get as much as possible with you. I guess now we can take it over and go through the amazing presentation which you guys have made. And as usual, I'll be taking the liberty to ask the stupidest questions to learn more from you guys. Please take it over.
Sure. Thank you, Vivek. So maybe सबसे पहले इंट्रोडक्शन में बात करते हैं कि IPOs, what has happened in 2024. So brilliant years for IPOs. Like we have had the max number of IPOs across any year per se in the past. Like we had 268 primary listings, जिसमें से 90 कुछ मेन बोर्ड लिस्टिंग थी, बाकी SME लिस्टिंग थी. 2024 was a year of IPOs, and the way that IPOs were recepted, we were in a way the IPO nation, क्योंकि every week there were like 7-8 IPOs coming, because if you think about it, 52 हफ्ते हैं, 268 IPO आए हैं पूरे साल में, तो हर हफ्ते अराउंड 5 से 6 IPO आ रहे हैं, right? Consistently we raised, like the markets raised close to $20 billion through this IPO proceeds per se. So it's been a very, very good year, and this was also the year when we had the biggest IPO offering in the Indian history. Hyundai came with its IPO. They raised like 28,000 crore rupees. It was the second biggest IPO across the world of 2024. So a lot of good years. But what this has meant is कि अचानक से ना, there has been a lot more liberalization of companies wanting to come to primary listings. जैसे आप देखोगे तो एक जगह में एक स्टैट पढ़ रहा था कि 2018 में जब कंपनी आती थी तो उसका एवरेज रेवेन्यू होता था अराउंड 2,500 crores. अब that average revenue has gone down to, let's say, around 800 crore rupees. So the average revenue has reduced by 40%. Similarly, average market cap has also reduced by 40%. So companies are just seeing this as a mechanism to raise money a lot more compared to what it was seen as earlier, and a lot more earlier than पहले क्या होता था कि लोग वीसी फंडिंग उठाएंगे, उसके बाद लास्ट सेगमेंट इज आईपीओ, आईपीओ हो गया कंपनी खत्म हो गई. सो इवन लीविंग अलोन एसएमई आईपीओस, जो मेन बोर्ड आईपीओस हैं उनकी भी एवरेज साइज जो है वो कम हो रही है ओवर टाइम, विच इज अ गुड थिंग बिकॉज अ लॉट मोर कंपनीज आर कमिंग एंड it's a young market, it's an IPO hungry market. It's they say especially in bull markets, India is a paper hungry market. क्योंकि क्या है, हमारी जो पी होती है एवरेज कंपनियों की, वो हम इतनी ज्यादा दे देते हैं कि एवरी टाइम दैट न्यू पेपर इज इशूड, इट इज एसेंशियली looked at it very favorably by the companies, by different investors per se. So 2024 has been a great year per se. The question was, it was supposed to continue as is, right? 25, 26. So जैसे मैंने बोला 268 companies आई IPO के लिए. There were some 1,000 companies which were ready to bring their IPOs in the next 2 years. So it should have continued as is, and we are confident it will continue as is. There might be a few lull here and there, which I'll talk about. But as I said, this will only continue to go up. Like I was seeing this stat जहाँ पे around 40,000 crore rupees की sanction मिल गया है SEBI से to bring their IPOs, and then there's another 1 lakh crore which is still with SEBI but which will get sanctioned anytime soon. And then there are a lot more big IPOs, let's say Reliance Jios of the world, who are still to bring their IPO, and which will be huge size IPOs per se. So that's why we feel that the market would be going forward as well. But right now what has happened is there's this lull. This is primarily because of the primary market. अगर primary market को अच्छा करना है तो secondary market needs to be robust. So if there's anything off on the secondary market is essentially जो कि already listed company है. Primary market क्या, नई कंपनी आके list हो रही हैं. So as I said, secondary market in itself, because of global uncertainties, tariff वगैरह का जो चल रहा है पर से, this has been a slight lull. जैसा मैंने यहाँ पे भी लिखा है कि मार्च पूरे महीने में एक भी आईपीओ नहीं आया, एंड दिस वाज प्रोबेबली द फर्स्ट मंथ इन द लास्ट 23 months जहां पे पूरे महीने में एक भी आईपीओ नहीं आया. द लास्ट आईपीओ व्हिच केम वाज Feb 18th, Quality Power. So we have had a 50-day hiatus when there's been no mainboard IPOs, and SME IPOs I think haven't happened in the last 10 days per se as well. So we are going through that slight lull. But this is a good time, and why we wanted to do this space right now, because again we understand not the best time to do a space on or a podcast on why should we apply to IPOs, how should we evaluate to IPOs, because none of them are coming. But this is a good time to understand some of that theory, because markets का ये है कि market will always work in peaks and troughs. तो जब trough है तो you utilize that time in order to be prepared for a peak, and peak will come, because eventually that is how markets will happen per se.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
हर
So
रात के बाद सवेरा आता है.
Correct. With that, having set up कि 2024 कैसा रहा, and we believe that there will be something like that, let's understand. थोड़ी थ्योरी करते हैं सेक्शन 2 में, उसके बाद सेक्शन 3 में प्रैक्टिकल करेंगे कि कैसे एवेल्युएट करते हैं आरएचपीस को. सेक्शन 2 स्टिल की आईपीओ क्या होता है, फ्रेश इशू क्या होता है, ओएफएस क्या होता है, उन सब की बात करते हैं एक बार, जस्ट टू सेट अप दैट एजेंडा, ताकि जब हम सेक्शन 3 में बात कर रहे हो कि ऑब्जेक्ट ऑफ द इशू क्या है, उसकी बात करें तो एटलीस्ट पता हो कि क्यों हो रहा है वो ऊपर से. सो एट द वेरी हाई लेवल, व्हाट इज आईपीओ? सो आईपीओ से पहले क्या होता है, एक प्रमोटर ग्रुप होता है जिसके पास वो प्राइवेटली हेल्ड कंपनी है. उसमें से कंपनी बोलेगी कि मैं शेयर इशू कर देती हूँ अपने पब्लिक इन्वेस्टर्स को, और उनसे हर शेयर के अगेंस्ट एक स्पेसिफिक प्राइस पे वो इशू कर देती हूँ. फिर उसकी प्राइस डिस्कवरी होती है उस दिन, जिसपे वो प्राइस ऊपर या नीचे खुलता है, और उस हिसाब से वो पब्लिकली ट्रेड होता रहता है डिपेंडिंग ऑन द फ्रीक्वेंसी एक्सेट्रा. सो दैट्स हाउ आईपीओ प्राइमरी मार्केट वर्क्स per se. And why do companies bring their companies in IPO is because they want to raise money. Either they want to take an exit, the promoter wants to take a partial exit, or they want to, raise money to do capex, etc. Or they want to gain credibility in the market, because it's a listed company, तो थोड़ी credibility ज्यादा होती है कि ये कंपनी को ऑलरेडी लोग जानते हैं. अगेन अवेयरनेस ज्यादा होती है कि लोगों को पता रहता है कि ये कंपनी लिस्टेड है. सो ऑल ऑफ दोज आर सम ऑफ द रीजंस व्हाई कंपनीज ब्रिंग देयर IPOs. अब एक बार 2024 पे वापस चलते हैं और देखते हैं कि क्या क्या आईपीओ है. सो बेसिकली दो प्रकार से आईपीओ कंपनी कर सकती है. तो या तो वो फ्रेश इशू लाएगी, या तो ओएफएस लाएगी, ऑफर फॉर सेल, या तो कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ बोथ लाएगी. तो फ्रेश इशू क्या है? फ्रेश इशू इज बेसिकली एनी मनी विच कंपनी अगर जैसे ये बोल रही है कि मैं 50 करोड़ का आईपीओ ला रही हूँ एट अ 200 करोड़ मार्केट कैप, अगेन रफ नंबर्स मैं बोल रहा हूँ. सो उसमें क्या है, वो 50 करोड़ क्या है, वो रेस कर रहे हैं, अपनी कंपनी को डाइल्यूट कर रहे हैं उसका 25% इन ऑर्डर टू रेस 50 CR. तो जो 50 CR है वो या तो फ्रेश इशू हो सकता है. फ्रेश इशू का मतलब क्या है कि वो जो पैसा है वो कंपनी में लगेगा वापस से. सो इट माइट बी फॉर कैपेक्स की कैपेसिटी एक्सपेंशन करेंगे, इट माइट बी कि हमें वर्किंग कैपिटल चाहिए, इट माइट बी कि हमें नई मशीनरी लगानी है, नया लैंड खरीदना है, नई कंपनी एक्वायर करनी है जिससे हमारा रेवेन्यू बढ़ेगा. All of those things get into the fresh issue side of things, and then you have something called the OFS, which is offer for sale, which is a exit, partial exit for the promoter. उसमें क्या है, जो प्रमोटर ग्रुप है वो अपना शेयर उठा के तुम्हें बेच दे रही है. तो तुमने जो एक्स्ट्रा पैसा कंपनी ने रेस किया वो कंपनी में नहीं लगा, वो बस प्रमोटर ने एग्जिट ले लिया पैसे. सो लाइक लास्ट ईयर मैंने आपको बताया कि $20 billion हमने रेस किया, out of which around 46% was fresh issue, 54% was OFS. So a very half and half sort of a issue. ब्रेकअप. अगर मैं बात करूं टॉप 5 फ्रेश इश्यूज, तो वोडाफोन का एफपीओ आया था अराउंड 18,000 करोड़ का, विच वाज अ फ्रेश इशू, ऑल ऑफ विच वाज अ फ्रेश इशू. देन एनटीपीसी ग्रीन ने अपना, जो एनटीपीसी की एक सब्सिडरी थी, उसने अपना आईपीओ लाया था अराउंड 10,000 करोड़ का, ऑल ऑफ विच वाज अ फ्रेश इशू. देन ऑन द ओएफएस साइड, Hyundai Motors was a OFS, 28,000 करोड़ का OFS. विशाल मेगा मार्ट was a 8,000 करोड़ OFS. अब ना एक जनरल परसेप्शन होता है कि OFS, लोग क्या करते हैं कि OFS है तो उसको थोड़ा सा बुरा मानते हैं कि यार अगर इतनी अच्छी कंपनी में प्रमोटर को बेच के जा रहा है मेरे को, which is not necessarily the case. Like there are good OFSs, there are bad OFSs as well. And हम वो third section में जाएंगे तो सीखेंगे एक बार कैसे होता है. But maybe Tanmay can talk right now very quickly about what are good OFSs and what are bad OFSs at a very high level theoretically.
So there is a public perception around this offer for sale thing. If a company is doing an OFS in the IPO, like be it a complete OFS or more than half, like partial or more than half OFS, it is generally considered bad. But I'm not saying they are completely wrong, but they are not even completely correct. So we need to understand various dynamics around the OFS part. Now, just taking an example, let's say there's a company in the IT segment, okay, who is making like 500 or 1,000 crore positive cash flow per annum, and the capital they need to employ for future is very less than the cash flows they are accruing annually. So if the company wants to go public, they will have no choice to go public except doing an OFS. Because just think logically, you are writing like, I want to raise 500 crores for setting up this software thing, I want to buy computers, I want to buy space, and you just go to SEBI. SEBI will ask you कि यार आपके बैंक अकाउंट में ऑलरेडी 2,000 करोड़ पड़ा है, तो why aren't you using that funds to do this rather than coming to markets and asking for the fresh capital? So then these companies with very decent cash flows go to their legal experts, the law firms. They advise them कि यार you don't have any other choice to go for an IPO other than doing an offer for sale. So this is the very first, very basic reason why the offer for sales are done. So now there is one more question कि OFS कहाँ पे अच्छा है, कहाँ पे बुरा है? It's good where the company's cash flows are very great. Second, the company has already raised some growth capital before doing the IPO, be it an pre-IPO placement, be it an private placement, be it an P or VC kind of a funding, or be in a there are few things like you need funds to do some acquisition. But let's say you have already done it via internal accruals. Then why would you need some other capital round to be raised? So, okay, but there are few companies where the company genuinely requires the funds. Let's say it has some debt on the books, it needs some working capital, it needs some funds for future expansion, or let's say it's companies in some manufacturing kind of a setup, and the company has very less capacity, like उनका capacity utilization is like above 90% or be above 80%, which cannot let the company to fuel the future growth. But if the company is not tackling these issues, which will strengthen the balance sheet or take the company to a different level, and just doing an OFS to give an exit to the investors or give some liquidity to the promoters, that should be considered negative. Now there is one more dynamic towards why OFS is done. No, the funds which have already invested in the company long back, like be it a private equity fund, be it a venture capital fund, be it some early family house backer, be it some alternatives which you called as AIFs also. So these guys have a fund life, and and in India the average fund life should be like 4 years, 5 years. So after that, these funds need to partially or completely take an exit. So IPO is a source of for the company to do to give an liquidity or the partial or the complete exit to these funds. So in some cases, a retail investor can say why the company is not giving the investor or PEVC an exit via the internal accruals. But just think, giving exit to an fund by using the internal accruals can dampen the balance sheet quality, or can restrict the company to do the aggressive expansion, or the companies. There are very good set of companies. Let's say it's a consumer company, or it's a retail kind of a company. So you grow till a point. After that point, you need to spend a lot of money, be it in a marketing thing, be it in advertising, be it doing some geographical expansion. But for that, your balance sheet needs to be very, very healthy. But if that is not healthy and you are giving an exit to that investor via your internal accruals or the bank balance made by the company, I would say 3-4 years of the hard work via internal accruals, so that will be a negative thing. But we need to understand the stock market might not have that kind of a company in the market. And if that XYZ company wants to come in the market just by doing an OFS or partial OFS or more than half OFS with lower fresh issue, we should welcome that. But in 20% cases, there are a few instances where the company genuinely requires the funds, but still the company is doing majority OFS or full OFS, or not raising as much capital it needs. And there is also one more important thing to understand. There is a point called as minimum public shareholding. What is this point? So the point is very simple, that the regulator wants the company to bring its promoter shareholding to 75% or below while during IPO or in next 3 years. But this second point of next 3 years is majorly for the larger companies. Now just think, I would say 1500 2000 crore market cap company cannot raise like 200-250 crores and saying कि 2 साल बाद जब हमारा थोड़ा market cap बढ़ जाएगा, then we will dilute our another 15% to respect the 25% minimum public shareholding criteria assigned by the SEBI. So what happened is there are few very good companies, small size of companies, who want to meet that criteria of 25% minimum promoter shareholding, but it cannot show the use of those IPO proceeds to some extent. Now just think, there was very recent, the last main board IPO. So we had a question to the management, why just you raised 200 crore as a fresh issue, and why you did 600 crore OFS? So he answered that in a different sense. See, the capex we were intending to do will increase our capacity by 9 times. 9 times. But when you just show that point in your RHP, and then you just submit that to the SEBI, SEBI will surely is going to ask you कि ये जो 9x आप कर रहे हो, इसके लिए आपके पास एक बिफोर हेड ऑर्डर्स होने चाहिए, और विजिबिलिटी होने चाहिए, और फ्यूचर प्रोस्पेक्ट्स होने चाहिए जहां पे आपको ऑर्डर्स मिलेंगे, and then you will complete or execute those orders using the new capacity. But the company is saying यार मेरा जो ऑर्डर होता है वो 6 महीने में 2 से 3 महीने में आता है, और मैं उनको 3 महीने में एग्जीक्यूट कर देते हैं. So we cannot give that thing to the SEBI because we don't have that before it. So the company unknowingly had to do that OFS to meet that 25% shareholding thing. So we need to also understand that in, I would say, 50 to 60% cases, it's not that promoters or funds want to do OFS, but they have no other options to make that 25%. No, now someone might say कि main board में तो 3 साल का criteria होता है कि आप 25% आपको 3 साल में करना है. But majorly this criteria used by those companies which are very larger in size. Like I would say that band is beyond that 5,000 crore market cap. जहाँ पे ये very common practice है कि अभी 15%, 12%, 20% डाइल्यूट कर लो और 5 से 10% बाद में विल डू लाइक 2 साल बाद, 1.5 साल बाद, 2.5 साल बाद. बट इन स्मॉलर कंपनीज दे ऑप्ट टू कंप्लाई विद द सेबी रेगुलेशंस बिफोर क्योंकि क्या होता है आफ्टर लिक्विडिटी set of shares or the liquidity is infused in the market via the new offering, doing one more issue, be it FPO, be it QIP, be it OFS, gets critical outside. I won't say critical, but complex for the company. So the smaller companies opt to comply during the IPO part itself. So in summary, if I say OFS is not always bad. This is a thick misconception, and this should not be a criteria to evaluate an IPO. कि OFS से तो यार नहीं avoid कर देते कि we are putting the money in the company and कंपनी में एक भी रुपया नहीं जा रहा है, सारा पैसा प्रमोटर के जेब में जा रहा है. So that is a wrong thing. So there is a need to upgrade this thesis in especially the retailers mindset कि हर बार OFS खराब नहीं होता है. So that's it from the OFS part.
Point taken.
हमने बहुत बार देखा है कि यूजुअली ना लोग ऐसे पॉइंटर बनाते हैं, इसका पी 100 है, इसका वो कंप्लीट ओएफएस है इसलिए अवॉइड है. बट लाइक पी इज नॉट द ओनली मेट्रिक टू लुक एट, राइट? So we'll talk about valuation as well, but yeah, just wanted to cover the OFS pointer.
Just one thing I will add, just one thing on the OFS side, I'll just say, I don't think it is right to also demonize, like there's this, mentality ki promoters are taking an exit. How dare they? We demonize that thing. And I don't think that is right, because you have to also look at it from the promoter's angle, right? They have spent sometimes 20, 30 years building a business, taking it to a certain level. This is probably the first time they're getting serious liquidity. They would have probably obviously made some money from the business, but this is the first time they're actually getting some kind of significant, I'd say, even if it is not life-changing, but something significant for them, especially if you look at the smaller companies. So I think it's wrong to demonize. You have to look at it case to case. And it is understandable if someone has built a 500,000 crore business to take a small OFS after 15 years of hard work. I don't think we should just eradicate that and just say that, oh, how dare they?
Point taken. Actually, Rohit, I was also looking at Hyundai Motors. I mean, typically, if you look at these names, your perception will be that sahi time pe nikal gaye. But people are not realizing कि 82% stake of Hyundai is still there in Hyundai Motor India. It is not that they've exited the country. They probably needed some money for whatever purpose. They may have internal requirement there outside, and they have right to unlock their value at some stage of their career, right? I mean, if I look at this as an entrepreneur, if equity market being the epitome of capitalism, if it offers me an opportunity to unlock some wealth from it, why won't I do it?
Yeah, correct. And I think the other thing is, we as investors, many of us are traders, right? So we are happy to buy, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell. We'll buy today and 1 month we're out, and we never look at this. But we want that promoter to have, for 100 years to have never sold a single share. Like that is the mentality. I think that is the thing that we need to a little bit change.
To that.
It is very similar to how in football we have a favorite club. You can't change your favorite club, but the players can keep changing. It is player will change and you are okay with it कि ठीक है आज ये चेल्सी के लिए खेलता था अब यूनाइटेड के लिए खेलेगा. बट मैं यूनाइटेड सपोर्टर हूँ तो मैं यूनाइटेड सपोर्टर ही रहना चाहिए. वैसे ही इट इज स्टार्ट ऑफ प्रमोटर्स लाइक दैट कि भाई तेरी कंपनी, बिकॉज द जनरल परसेप्शन व्हिच आई विल टेल यू व्हिच कम्स इन इज कि यार अगर तेरे को पता है कि तेरी कंपनी में वैल्यू अनलॉक होनी है अभी, सो व्हाई आर यू टेकिंग एग्जिट? But it needs to be seen that it is a very partial exit, which is just like infusing liquidity for the promoter, right? Which is what is happening.
Yeah.
Plus, let me add one more point इस पे. तो यूजली क्या होता है ना कि जैसे हुंडई का केस विवेक सर ने बोला अभी कि हुंडई में 82% स्टेक है एंड पीपल फिर भी बैशिंग आउट. इसमें एक पॉइंट और था कि लोग बोल रहे थे कि आईपीओ आने से पहले ही कैसे डिविडेंड लिया सारा. मतलब जब आपने उसे पहले पैसा दिया ही नहीं तो डिविडेंड आपको मिलेगा ही क्यों? मतलब मैं तो शेयर होल्डर आईपीओ के बाद बनूंगा तो आपको डिविडेंड क्यों मिलेगा? तो इस बात पे भी बहुत होता है कि अच्छा आईपीओ से पहले इतना बड़ा डिविडेंड इन्होंने निकाल लिया, विच इज ऑल्सो रॉन्ग. कि उसे ऐसे नहीं बोल सकते, जब उसने स्टार्टिंग से ही काम उसने किया है तो डिविडेंड भी उसका ही हक है.
हाँ, अगर डिविडेंड निकाल भी लिया तो अल्टीमेटली स्टॉक प्राइस विल गेट द रिफ्लेक्शन राइट ऑफ द डिविडेंड विच हैज बीन टेकन आउट. अगर नहीं निकालता डिविडेंड तो बुक वैल्यू ज्यादा होता है, तो स्टॉक प्राइस भी ज्यादा होता है, नहीं लॉजिकली मैथमेटिकली. मतलब
Yeah, correct.
हाउ इज दैट इशू कि डिविडेंड निकाल लिया?
So no, so what had happened was that 20 right before Hyundai IPO came, उनने एक बहुत बड़ा chunk of their free cash flow निकाल लिया था. So ideally that should get reflected into valuation of the company.
Of
Now
course.
valuation is always questionable. कि वो जिस price पे आया क्या उससे कम लाना था ज्यादा लाना था, that all is questionable. But to be able to say how dare they take out dividend is something which is off, or how dare they sell all that 18% in OFS is wrong per se. Now valuation I understand कि उनने हो सकता है expensive market को सही नहीं read किया हो, या फिर they could have been greedy. All of those things are in play which we as investors need to understand and then take a call. But this is something which is the layer of the market and we need to act accordingly.
हाँ, irrationality का कोई लॉजिक नहीं है. But by the way, I mean the listed price of Hyundai Motor was 1931. Right now it's 1600. I mean
Yeah,
technically
and
stock
I
is
think the
down by.
IPO price was 1960.
Yeah.
So it never touched its IPO. I remember I got exited 1960. It touched its IPO price for like 30 seconds. All of 30 seconds for 1960 पे गया था. उसके बाद it has been a downward trend. I think उन्होंने valuation essentially थोड़ी सी एक्सपेंसिव साइड पे करी थी, थोड़ी यहाँ पे ज्यादा, वो जो भी आप वर्ड यूज कर लो. प्लस दिस इंडस्ट्री हैज बीन चेंजिंग रैपिडली विद all these tariffs coming in play. If BYDs of the world come in India, that's a game changer for the industry, right? So it's going through all of those changes. So I would say that the IPO was timed pretty well. The valuation was probably on the expensive side, but actually I'm saying that with the benefit of hindsight. अब जब मेरे को दिखा है आईपीओ प्राइस क्या कर रहा है, तब मैं वो बोल सकता हूँ कि हाँ ठीक है ये हुआ था. बट अगेन एवरी आईपीओ नीड्स टू बी सीन केस टू केस एट दैट मोमेंट ऑफ टाइम विद द इंफॉर्मेशन दैट यू हैव.
Right. Fair point. I think that's a fair enough conclusion that every IPO needs to be seen on a case to case. We should not have a preconceived notion when we are at least studying an IPO. कि यार इसका तो FPO ज़्यादा है तो सॉरी इसका ऑफर फॉर सेल ज़्यादा है तो मैं इसको पढ़ूंगा ही नहीं. ये तो नहीं होना चाहिए सोच. पॉइंट टेकन. आगे बढ़ते.
करेक्ट. सो अब एक वेरी हाई लेवल एसएमईज की बात कर लेते हैं. सो वी हैव अ यूनिक स्ट्रक्चर वेयर वी हैव अ एसएमई बोर्ड. इन 2011 सेबी स्टार्टेड वेयर जो छोटी कंपनियां, स्मॉल एंड मीडियम एंटरप्राइजेस, स्पेशली बिकॉज दे often struggle to raise funds from banks. तो उनके लिए डेब्ट उठाना इतना मुश्किल होता है, स्पेशली अनकोलेटरलाइज्ड डेब्ट. तो सेबी ने क्या बोला कि दे कैन गेट देमसेल्व्स रजिस्टर्ड ऑन द एसएमई बोर्ड ऑफ इंडिया. बोथ एनएससी एज वेल एज बीएसई बोथ हैव सेपरेट एसएमई बोर्ड्स. और उनको क्या करना है, उसमें सेबी से अप्रूवल नहीं लेना है. सेबी डजंट नीड टू अप्रूव, जस्ट द बोर्ड needs to approve either the BSc or the NSC. They can approve and then they can get listed on any of these platforms. And there are some very specific conditions which they need to meet. And then their regulations are slightly lesser. Like उनको ना quarterly result देना compulsory नहीं होता है. They can live with half yearly results and things like that. And that has seen a tremendous increase in the last 3-4 years. And again, it's a cause and effect. Ki retail investors have made so much money in this segment that there has been a lot of interest from retail investors. Because there's a lot of interest from retail investors, now people are just putting in bringing more of these SME IPOs. But as you will see, this is a pretty exponential graph. पिछले 4 साल में in terms of the SME IPOs which have came in, 2020 it was pretty dead because 2018-2019 period for SMEs was bad. Like there were a lot of companies which didn't live up to the hype through which they had been listed. But after 2020, there have been quite a few good companies which have came in. And generally क्या होता है ना, मेन बोर्ड में क्या होता है, कुछ ही कंपनियां आ रही है, राइट. प्लस मेन बोर्ड के जो मर्चेंट बैंकर्स होते हैं, जो कंपनी होती है, वो नुआंस जितनी होती है कि दे आर एबल टू प्राइस इट अकॉर्डिंग टू द कंपनी. बट एसएमई में हमने क्या देखा है कि कंपनियां जो होती है ना, उनका एक पी मिलता है उनको कि भाई तुमको 15 का पी देंगे या 10 का पी देंगे, डिपेंडिंग ऑन मार्केट कैसा चल रहा है. तो हर कंपनी उस पर आती है, और हर कंपनी अगर उस पर आ रही है तो and then there will be a few ways you will be able to figure out कि यार इसका ये मोट है या फिर ये इसका ग्रोथ कैपिटल अनलॉक होगा इसमें आईपीओ में वर्किंग कैपिटल ये मिलेगा तो यू विल एज अ सीजन्ड इन्वेस्टर यू विल बी एबल टू से कि this is what my change will occur and because of which this company would be able to do well over the let's say next 3-4 years because of which some of the bets if they work exponentially well. Like there are 100x stories in 3 years, 50x, multiple 50x stories in last 3 years. And again, market's going through a slight downturn, but that is what the beauty of SME IPOs is. And they have raised a lot of money. Like if you'll see $19.5 billion जो मैंने बोला कि total raise हुआ था उसमें से around $1.2 billion is in SMEs. So around 5 to 6% of all raises is happening through SMEs. And then you will see retail applicants जो apply करते हैं वो भी over the years has been increasing क्योंकि there is a lot of listing pop which is coming in because a lot of people are applying and providing liquidity to companies. So more and more retail investors are coming in on this as well. Rohit, do you have anything to add on this slide before I ask Vivek for any questions?
Just one point I'll add. So there is a very structural thing in the Indian market for why SME IPOs, I mean, why we have so many SME IPOs. Is you wouldn't see this in the US, you wouldn't see this in the UK or China. This particular thing, in my view at least, is mainly because our primary markets are actually very underdeveloped. And I'm saying this as someone who's seen the primary market, the private markets very closely, from both sides as a founder and as someone who was in the private market before that. The way a VC or a PE evaluates, or early stage venture capital funds evaluate a company is they want a 0 to 100 kind of exit, which means the company today, if it works, it'll give me 100. Or it will probably die. It is unlikely to give a middling exit, right? Of course, that happens, but that's never the outcome, which means that there is a very thin layer of companies that can raise private capital from the institutional investors in India, at least, which means that you're going after the, e-commerce companies or the tech companies or the AI companies, guys who probably need to invest upfront, will be unprofitable. So there's a certain profile that is maybe 1% of the SME base, right? Startups will make a very small part of that base. The remaining 99%, there are still very high quality companies in the, with ambitious founders, ambitious promoters, maybe not looking for 100x growth, but looking for 5x, 10x, very high chance of that growth. And that is what this particular gap, this kind of capital raising is helping us fill, which is why I think this SME IPO is an incredible, unlock for the markets in this country. So whoever thought of this back then, it's taken quite some time to get here. And of course, people game it and all. But whoever thought of it back then has done a fantastic job in creating this platform. I think we need to recognize that this is a riskier asset class. It sits somewhere between that VC asset class and probably a lot of just family-run businesses that don't really, they're happy, they get some money, they'll do something, they'll grow on the 10-15%. That's good. But there is this layer that this this kind of capital is unlocking. So I just want to add that on this SME IPO piece. I think it's a very it's a very proud moment, I think, for the Indian markets to enable such companies to flourish.
Ajay, I'm glad, Rohit, you raised this point, and it's something which is very personal experience also, which I would mind sharing in a public forum. That as a product, everyone wants to grow, and StockEdge as a product also wanted, we all want to grow. And one of the, hot money target for growth is VCs. That's how the ecosystem was evolved in last 4-5 years, that if you're funded from VC, you are already tagged as a successful venture. But nonetheless, that was the era we all lived in. And whenever you talk to a VC, this thought process of whether you can grow 100x. Now, when you have to answer this question, and you have been an entrepreneur, Rohit, so I am sure you'll appreciate this. We cannot answer this question. I don't know 100x, 200x, 400x. I remember in Shark Tank, one of the guy who was asked this question, and he bluntly said that, I don't know. Why are you asking me this question? Who knows it? Right? But then I can't blame VCs for that, because they are there to only invest in 100x opportunities. Because wo invest kar rahe 100 mein se 90 will fail, so probably 10 will be there, and that 10, if they don't give them 100x, their ROE will be bad. So where do you go? Then a founder like me, where do you go? You don't want to go to a bank, because bank will eventually ask for a collateral, and a sensible founder will not leverage as much, especially a service product founder will not leverage, because I'm not running a factory. It's a product which has been developed. So where do you go? Then you go to sensible investors. For example, we got Ramesh Damani ji, we got Ajay, we got Dinesh Agarwal, we got Kotak. Sensible investors who believe that you will do something. We know you're doing a great work in society. You know, we know that you will reach somewhere. Whether you will give 10x, 50x, 100x, that doesn't matter to us. We know that तुमको पैसा दिया तो तुम पैसा नुकसान तो नहीं करेगा. You'll be sincere with your work. Now, if tomorrow one of my founders, I mean, I don't have any plans yet, but if suppose one of our founders, we suppose want some kind of a value unlocking, or my investors, they want some kind of an exit. So either someone will acquire the company, or eventually we need a platform, right? Where we can see some value unlocking happening. And that is only SME. Even a main board platform may not be suited for an enterprise like us, who are still, sub 1,000 crore revenue enterprise. Main board is serious stuff. SME is good playground for people like us who still want to have a growth mindset. So you rightly said this. It's a big boom for our industry, especially when banks were dominating this entire capital market ecosystem. I think this has been a great boon for entrepreneurs like all of us. And full thank you to all of you who are throwing good vibes for this ecosystem. I've been recording a couple of SME videos of late with people like Sandeep, Amit, etc. And I feel that the nation building is happening through this segment. Yes, there are people who have taken undue advantage. But then initial phase in new platform, people do take advantages. But as the platform grows, as the regulation around the platform grows, I think this will become a very important part of India growth story. Sorry, I took more time.
Yeah. Just one additional point I'll say, Vivek, because we have, say, 1 million SMEs or 10 million SMEs. I don't know the number. We've got just 200 listing a year. Even if you say that 100,000 SMEs are of a high quality and are, ambitious founders. And I'm sure in India that number is, the number I'm saying is far lesser than the actual number. Just imagine how many more companies can actually access the capital markets and actually create value for the country at the end of the day, right? Because 200 is nothing. 200 is point something % of the number of companies that can potentially list. So somewhere that stigma for this segment also needs to go away. Little bit, it would be good if liquidity also would follow. But I think this platform is very powerful.
True, I've been recording a couple of face-to-face, just started with F2F SMEs, MSMEs. And I recorded 2 founders, and I can clearly see that hunger inside them. And they were so happy to get a platform where they can showcase their hunger to public in large. Lovely.
By the way, VCs have also started recognizing SME as a platform. Like they are also seriously looking at companies which probably haven't done that brilliantly in terms of exceptional growth to be able to list them on SME platform and unlock some of the value and just get the company listed, because you can always migrate to a main board probably in a later period of time.
Yeah.
Moving forward, again, still some more theory. आपको थोड़ा सा और मैं bore करूँगा. I hope you don't fall asleep. But 2 more slides of theory before we actually move forward to the action and evaluate RHPs and how to read about companies. But just wanted to highlight, because we have a lot of questions around what are anchors, what are QIBs, what is retail, what is HNI. So this is a very high level structure for a profitable main board race. So again, it's very complicated कि profitable company में 35% retail होता है, unprofitable company में 10% हो जाता है. So things like that, but a very high level, you will see that in any category, when a company is raising IPO, they will have 2 kinds of investors. One would be your institutional investors, who would be people like, let's say, mutual funds of the world, banks of the world, who are institutions and just collecting money, and then they are putting through that channel. These tend to be a bit more researched, and they tend to understand about their IPOs or about the IPOs a bit more compared to the other segment, which is your retail plus HNI, which is people like you and me per se who are applying and holding or selling, buying and selling of IPOs. So QIB by definition is qualified institutional buyers. These are institutions, and then they are subdivided into two parts, which is your anchor investors and then your regular QIBs. Anchor investors by definition are people who provide anchor to the IPO once it is listed. क्या होगा कि let's say IPO list हुआ और सब बेच के ना चले जाए. So how do you make sure that there is some पर्सन हु, जैसे एंकर होता है उसका काम होता है शिप को एंकर करके रखना अपनी जगह पर, वैसे एंकर इन्वेस्टर्स क्या होते हैं, वो उनकी लिक्विड नहीं होती, वो इलिक्विड होती है उनकी इन्वेस्टमेंट की. वो पहले एक महीने तक कुछ नहीं बेच सकते, एक महीने के बाद 50% ऑफ जो उन्होंने डाला है आईपीओ वो बेच सकते हैं, और 3 महीने बाद पूरा बेच सकते हैं. सो इससे क्या हुआ, कंपनी को 1 और 3 महीने तक दैट पोर्शन विच इज लाइक फॉर अ प्रॉफिटेबल कंपनी 30% ऑफ देयर आईपीओ रेज इज लॉक्ड फॉर द फर्स्ट 1 month. सो जो ट्रेड होगा फ्री फ्लोट 70% ही होगा बाय द वे. सो दैट्स समथिंग विच इज इंटरेस्टिंग टू सी, विच इज अ पॉइंट. एंड एंकर्स में क्या होता है, फिर कई सारे लोग like when the times are good, people want to see how do you become anchor, because anchor में advantage क्या है. अगर आप ये liquidity का disadvantage ले रहे हो तो there has to be advantage as well, right? The advantage is कि आपको allotment के लिए लॉटरी में नहीं लगना है. लाइक यूजुअली क्या होगा कि मैं भी लॉटरी लगाऊंगा, आप भी लॉटरी लगाओगे, फिर जितना टाइम होगा उसमें से इतना परसेंटेज आपको मिलेगा. जैसे 200 गुना सब्सक्राइब हुआ तो 200 में से एक आदमी को मिलेगा. एंकर अलॉटमेंट इज guaranteed. It is upon the discretion of the promoter and the merchant banker. वो किसको एंकर देना चाहें वो उसको एंकर दे सकते हैं, but by definition anchor should be someone who is providing, who is not flipping. Now there are players who tend to flip and there are ways of circumventing that, not going into it, but anchor investors ideally should be people who do that per se. And that's why when we are reviewing IPOs हम ये भी देखते हैं कि anchor book कैसी है. Like, because when you are in this segment, and especially both main board and SMEs, maybe I'll invite Tanmay right now to speak about how to see what a good anchor book is. But generally what we have seen is that, especially on the SME side, क्योंकि main board में तो क्या कई सारे institutions होते हैं जो anchor book में होते हैं, SME side पे कई सारे AIF होते हैं, and these AIFs tend to show a repeatable pattern. Like कई सारे ऐसे होते हैं who are just like very famous for flipping. So जब वो आता है तो तुम्हें पता होता है कि दोस्त 1 महीना होगा ये फ्लोट तो अनलॉक होगी, इट वुड बी देयर इन द मार्केट. सो दैट्स समथिंग व्हिच यू नीड टू बी वेरी वेरी ऑफ. एंड अगेन एसएमई इन्वेस्टिंग इज अ लॉट ऑफ मैथ्स irrespective to what you say, because there, क्योंकि क्या होता है मैं आपको बताता हूँ, एग्जांपल देता हूँ. मेन बोर्ड में क्या होता है, तुम उसी दिन जितना चाहिए खरीद बेच सकते हो, इंट्राडे कर सकते हो. एसएमई में क्या होता है, इंट्राडे अलाउड नहीं होता है, टी टू टी होता है, ट्रेड टू ट्रेड होता है. मतलब तुम बीटीएसटी कर सकते हो, आज खरीदोगे तो कल ही बेच सकोगे. तो तुम्हारी फ्री फ्लोट तो लिमिटेड है, राइट? तुम्हारी फ्री फ्लोट लेट्स से 30 CR का रेज है और 20 CR की फ्री फ्लोट है, तो तुम्हें दिख जाएगा कि प्री ओपन में इतनी फ्री फ्लोट तो निकल गई. तो अगर 60% मेरी फ्री फ्लोट निकल गई है, 20% लोग भी होल्ड कर लें, तो सिर्फ 20% ही फ्री फ्लोट है, उसके बाद तो सर्किट ही लगना है. सो देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ क्रिएटिव वेज टू फाइंड आउट व्हाट विल हैपन टू दैट स्टॉक एटलीस्ट ऑन दैट डे. फिर अगले दिन सब वापस फ्लोट खुल जाएगी. बट देन पीपल ऑल्सो गो अहेड एंड सी कि एंकर वाले दिन क्या होगा. Will these anchors exit? Will these anchors tend to hold? So all of these things also play in. So this is more on the anchor side. Then you have regular QIB, which is people like institutions who just put in allotment like us. They also get allotment basis lottery कि कितने लोगों ने लगाया, 6 times QIB portion उनका फिल हुआ, तो हर 6 टाइम्स जो आपने लॉट साइज डाली है उसमें से एक आपको मिल जाएगा. ऑन द मेन, देन ऑन द रिटेल एंड एचएनआई साइड, सो हाउ इट इज डिवाइडेड इज, एंड अगेन दिस इज समथिंग व्हिच अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल हैव कंफ्यूजन ऑन कि आपको 2 लाख का कैसे मिलता है अलॉटमेंट, मेरे को तो 15,000 का मिलता है. बिकॉज अगेन आई ऑल्सो बिफोर August 2023 आई ऑल्सो यूज्ड टू थिंक कि आईपीओ अप्लाइंग इज जस्ट अ वेस्ट ऑफ टाइम, कि यार में एक आईपीओ लगेगा 6 में, फिर उसमें 15,000 का लगेगा, अगर वो 30 भी हो गया तो 15,000 के लिए इतनी मेहनत कौन करेगा. सो द थिंग इज, if you are applying less than 2 lakhs, you fall in a retail category automatically. And then if it is a oversubscribed IPO, like एक से भी गुना ज्यादा subscriber, so the maximum you can get is 15K only. Versus if you apply in a HNI category, i.e. more than 2 lakh rupees, then if you get it, you will at least get 2 lakhs worth of allotment. जो भी उसका लॉट साइज होगा उस हिसाब से होगा. फिर उसमें भी ऐसे होता है, SHNI होता है और बिग SHNI होता है. स्मॉल HNI क्या होता है? According to SEBI, it is 2 to 10 lakh rupees, which is falls in small HNI. Big HNI is greater than 10 lakh rupees. This is 5% reservation, this is 10%, this is 35%. So that makes 50% this, 50% this. This is again for a profitable company per se. So आप अगर 2 लाख का अलॉटमेंट डालोगे तो आपको 2 लाख का ही अलॉटमेंट मिलेगा, एंड दैट देन सडनली स्टार्ट्स बिकमिंग बिग. बट अगेन जो आपके अलॉटमेंट चांसेस होंगे वो बहुत कम होंगे, क्योंकि बहुत सारे लोग 2 लाख के लिए डाल रहे होंगे इस 5% कोटा में. यहाँ 10 लाख के ऊपर वाले 10% कोटा में कंपैरेटिवली कम लोग होंगे. तो यहाँ पे जो अलॉटमेंट चांसेस होंगे वो प्रोबेबली एटलीस्ट इससे 150, मतलब 5x ज्यादा होंगे. लाइक यहाँ पे आपको 1/200 होगा, तो आइडियली शुड बी समवेयर अराउंड 1/40. बट अगेन इट चेंजेस, क्योंकि अगेन बिकॉज देयर वर सो मेनी पॉप्स व्हिच आर कमिंग इन, पीपल स्टार्टेड borrowing money or things like that in order to put in big HNI. All of those funky things started happening. But until before, big HNI used to be a very good way to get allotments at least. So these are 4 different categories of investors which exist in a market on a main board side.
I have a question. ये जो रिटेल और HNI वाली कैटेगरी है, इसमें लॉटरी होती है पूरी, राइट? आया तो आया, नहीं तो नहीं आया. बट QIB वाली कैटेगरी में इट्स नॉट अ लॉटरी. वो अल्टीमेटली अगर वो सब्सक्राइब है तो प्रोपोर्शनेटली सबको फिर मिल जाता है, राइट?
करेक्ट, बिकॉज एंड ऑफ द डे इट इज लॉट बेसिस, राइट? सो QIB की क्या है, एप्लीकेशन बहुत ज्यादा होती है, एप्लीकेशन साइज कंपैरेटिवली ज्यादा होती है, राइट? सो उस हिसाब से उनको वो प्रोपोर्शन में मिल जाता है उसके. बट इफ यू थिंक अबाउट इट, लेट्स से अज्यूमिंग कि 1000 लॉट है वो और 1200 एप्लीकेशन डल गई, देन इट विल स्टिल बी अ लॉटरी. बट क्योंकि इंस्टीट्यूशन इतने कम है कि वो लॉटरी में जाएगा ही नहीं, उन सबको प्रपोर्शन में मिल जाएगा एटलीस्ट 1 लॉट एंड थिंग्स लाइक दैट.
क्योंकि 1000 एप्लीकेशन तो नहीं हो सकती.
हाँ, करेक्ट. सो इसलिए वो उसको बोलते हैं कि इतना तो मिल ही जाएगा. बट एंड ऑफ द डे इट इज ऑल्सो डम लॉटरी, लाइक कि 1:6 है, 6x सब्सक्राइब हुआ है IPO, और जैसे 60 करोड़ का IPO है, तो आपने 60 लाख डाला है तो आपको 10 लाख मिलेगा, क्योंकि 1/6 मिल जाएगा आपको उस हिसाब से. जबकि यहाँ क्या होता है, रिटेल में 1 लाख लॉट हैं और 6 लाख लोगों ने लगाया है. सो अचानक से दैट्स व्हाई इट स्टार्ट्स लुकिंग लाइक अ लॉटरी, ऑल्दो इट इज द सेम मैकेनिज्म ऑन बोथ सेंसेस.
Got it.
It is different on the SME side though. Still, which will change probably in the next 2 to 3 months. Don't have clarity, but until very recently, SMEs में क्या होता था, proportionate allotment होता था.
अच्छा.
उसका बहुत ही सिंपल डेफिनेशन में आपको समझाऊं तो, जितना आपने हलवे में शक्कर डाली है उतना हलवा मीठा बनेगा. तो आपने जितने की एप्लीकेशन लगाई है आपको उतना ज्यादा चांसेस होगा अलॉटमेंट का. जैसे एक IPO है, 1 करोड़ की 100x IPO है सब्सक्राइब, और अगर 1 लाख की एक लॉट है, तो अगर आपन ने 1 करोड़ की एप्लीकेशन डाली तो देयर इज अ गारंटी कि आपको 1 लॉट तो मिलेगी, 1 लाख का अलॉटमेंट तो मिलेगा ही मिलेगा. और जैसे जैसे आप नीचे जाते जाओगे, जैसे 100x सब्सक्राइब्ड है और आपने 2 लाख की एप्लीकेशन डाली है, 1 लाख का लॉट है, तो आपकी प्रोबेबिलिटी फिर से हो जाएगी कि 2/100 यानी 50 में से एक आदमी को मिलेगा उसमें. पर अगर आपने 4 लाख की एप्लीकेशन डाली है तो वो 4 लाख वाले 25 में से एक लोगों के बीच में बट जाएगी. सो दैट इज हाउ प्रोपोर्शनेट अलॉटमेंट काइंड ऑफ वर्क्स. बट दैट डजंट नीड टू बी लुक्ड इनटू मच डिटेल नाउ, क्योंकि सेबी ने ये बोल दिया है कि SME IPO भी अब प्रोपोर्शनेट बेसिस पे नहीं अलॉट होंगे और लॉटरी बेसिस पे अलॉट होंगे, विच वुड चेंज अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स. क्योंकि जब ये मेन बोर्ड में होता, क्योंकि मेन बोर्ड में भी पहले प्रोपोर्शनेट बेसिस पे ही होता था. अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल यूज्ड टू पुट बिग एप्लीकेशंस एंड लोग लोन पे 2 दिन के इंटरेस्ट पे लेके डालते थे. दे चेंज दैट बिकॉज ऑफ विच सब्सक्रिप्शन ड्रास्टिकली रिड्यूस्ड ओवरनाइट. क्योंकि अचानक से जैसे मेन SME में क्या होता है, मैं 10 करोड़ की एप्लीकेशन लगा दूं जस्ट टू गेट दोस 3-4 लॉट्स, राइट? आफ्टर इट चेंजेस, इट वोंट मेक सेंस कि आप 10 लाख के ऊपर कुछ भी लगाओ, इट इज द सेम थिंग, राइट? तो सब्सक्रिप्शन अचानक से बहुत कम लगने लगेगा, एंड देन अचानक से पीपल विल स्टार्ट थिंकिंग दैट इसकी इनहेरेंट डिमांड नहीं है. बिकॉज व्हाट हैपेंस इज पीपल टैग द डिमांड फॉर अ IPO, डिमांड फॉर अ कंपनी बाय कि वो कितना टाइम सब्सक्राइब हुआ है. बट द प्रॉब्लम इज इसमें ना बहुत हर्ड मेंटेलिटी है कि मेरे को 1 लॉट चाहिए इसलिए मैं और बड़ी एप्लीकेशन लगाते जाऊंगा क्योंकि और लोग लगाए जा रहे हैं. वर्सेस जैसे आप अभी देखोगे पिछले 1 महीने में IPO सब्सक्राइब भी नहीं हो रहे हैं. लाइक इट इज ऑलमोस्ट एवरीथिंग इज अवेलेबल. बट जो हो रहे हैं बीच में 2 IPO SME IPO थे, वो स्टिल 200x होते हैं. बिकॉज पीपल जस्ट गो अहेड एंड कि यार मेरे को 1 लॉटरी चाहिए तो मेरे को इतना लगाऊंगा तो सामने वाला उतना लगाएगा, एंड देन इट कीप्स गोइंग अप एंड अप एंड अप. सो दैट्स व्हाट वी हैव सीन इज द conundrum here per se.
Got it.
Yeah. Anybody has anything to add, or we can go to the last slide that I will probably skip at a high level? Perfect. So maybe last slide is again how to optimize your chances of allotment for as a retail guy. And again, this is not relevant right now क्योंकि अभी आप किसी भी IPO में कितना भी अप्लाई करो आपको सब मिल जाएगा because the markets are so bad that people are not applying, actively applying at all. But let's say if you still have to, and we have seen times where IPOs were 600x subscribed, 800x subscribed on the SME board, and then on main board also we have seen IPOs like 300x subscribed retail. Your SHNI subscribe 200x, big HNI subscribe 20x, 30x. So how do you increase your allotment chances? It's just, there's no maths. All I would want, there's no shortcuts. Everything is maths. You can kind of just apply from your family accounts. You can apply from multiple accounts. Do not mix applying in categories. Do not apply from two different demat accounts saying कि चलो एक grow से कर देता हूँ, एक Zerodha से कर देता हूँ. End of the day, it is pan level unique. So that's what, like, it's just perseverance. Keep applying and applying. One thing which I want to highlight, which has worked very well for us, and which is something which we do on our Sunday Investing podcast as well, is find unloved and misunderstood issues which don't tend to have a lot of GMP going for them. Gray market premium nahi hota hai, but end of the day, you understand that these companies should do well because of these reasons, and then applying for them tends to give you a higher allotment, and then you can probably hold on to them for a longer period of time as well.
Can you repeat this? Can you repeat this last statement?
Sure. So what happens is, जैसे लोग क्या करते हैं, so I'll tell you, a lot of people use their working capital of whatever they do, like their business, etc., in order to apply for IPOs. कि जो भी पॉप आएगा डे वन पे बेच दूंगा, जो भी पॉप आएगा वो एडिशनल बेनिफिट ही है, वो तो पैसा मेरा वैसे ही यूज हो रहा था, 2 दिन के लिए ब्लॉक होगा. बिकॉज व्हाट हैज हैपेंड, फ्लो हैज इंक्रीज ड्रास्टिकली. पहले क्या होता था, मैंने कभी किया तो नहीं है, बट आई हैव बीन टोल्ड कि पहले ऐसा होता था कि आईपीओ के लिए आपको फॉर्म भरना पड़ता था, फिर चेक के साथ सबमिट करके आना पड़ता था, फिर 15 दिन बाद अलॉटमेंट आता था, फिर 3 महीने बाद आपका चेक वापस आता था. नाउ वी आर एट अ स्टेज वेयर इट इज T+2 लिस्टिंग. लाइक आज आईपीओ खत्म होगा, कल अलॉटमेंट आएगा, परसों शेयर आएगा, नरसों लिस्टिंग होगी, T+3. So what has happened is flow, like तुम रिपीट करते रह सकते हो अपना पैसा. आज आईपीओ आया, आज आईपीओ लगाया तुमने, कल अलॉटमेंट आ गया, नहीं लगा, परसों वापस लगा दो किसी और आईपीओ में. सो T+2 पे तुम वो पैसा रिपीट करते रह सकते हो, राइट? सो बिकॉज ऑफ विच पीपल जस्ट लुक एट जीएमपी कि इसका ग्रे मार्केट प्रीमियम क्या है, उस हिसाब से मैं इस आईपीओ में लगा देता हूँ, मिलना तो है ही नहीं, 500 गुना सब्सक्राइब होगा, 600 गुना. सो एट दोज मोमेंट्स ऑफ टाइम इफ यू कैन फाइंड कंपनीज जिनका जीएमपी कम हो, क्योंकि उनका जीएमपी कम होता है तो जो ज्यादा जीएमपी वाला ना वो बहुत ज्यादा कैश फ्लो लाइक अपने पास ले जाता है कैश. तो जो कम जीएमपी ना उसमें तुम प्रोबेबली वो 20x ही सब्सक्राइब होगी, 10x ही सब्सक्राइब होगी, तो उसमें कम अमाउंट डाल के तुम ज्यादा अलॉटमेंट ले सकते हो. But again, having said that, you will still have to understand why would this company do well, what is working for the company, for which you will have to probably read the RHP and listen to promoter interviews, which would be a great segue into this third segment, which is how to evaluate IPOs.
So high gray market premium necessarily means that the company stock price is in demand and the price should ideally should go up.
That is what is thought by most of the retailers, but it is wrong as well. Like again, gray market works in its own way. And gray में भी यही होता है कि लोग पढ़ते हैं कंपनियों को, किसी के पास डिमांड होगी, किसी पे कोई ये बोलेगा कि ये इतना खुलेगा. It's again like it's a different segment. But ideally, that is how retailers kind of think of it. But gray markets can often be wrong as well. We have seen multiple times where gray is saying that the listing will happen at 50% and it happens flat, or the gray market saying that the listing will happen flat and then it opens at, let's say, 30-40%. And that is where we make a killing. Like First Cries of the world, Sci Lives of the world, those are companies which we tend to find during in our podcast, and then we apply a lot in them, get allotment, and then make a lot of money in those companies.
तो ग्रे मार्केट कहाँ दिखता है?
So there are a lot of apps which tend to publish gray market prices.
Okay.
And then there are websites as well. But other than that, informally, it's just WhatsApp groups where people tend to, and again, it's trust, high trust basis. कि आपने बोला कि मैंने इतने पे बेच दिया, सामने वाले ने बोला इतने पे खरीद लिया. So there are groups which exist like that, which is unregulated. They will not promote, not linked with anyone as such. But what you can also do in the advert of technology, there are apps which will tell you कि इसका ग्रे मार्केट प्रीमियम क्या चल रहा है, which will give you graphs of कि इसका ग्रे मार्केट प्रीमियम कैसे ऑसिलेट कर रहा है, ऊपर जा रहा है, नीचे जा रहा है, over time will save all of that information for you to kind of read.
समझ गया.
I'll just add one more point, which is the reverse of this gray market point, which is for the stocks which don't seem to have it may not have a gray market premium, and the subscription might be low. And then people might intuitively think, if subscription is not happening, how will this list well? But it's very important for people who apply for IPOs to understand that there is a group of people who apply for IPOs and who might flip it and whatever, they have a certain goal with what they want to do. And there's a very different group of people who come on listing day to buy and secure a certain amount of allocation that they want. If they want 50,000 shares, they want 1 crore, 30 lakhs, whatever, they want a certain amount. They'll only get that if they come on listing. If they come and apply for the IPO, how much they'll get, not get, that's a jhanjat that many people don't want to do. Even Yash, who's sitting here, is an exclusively post-listing person. He will not apply for IPOs. So don't conflate the lack of demand at IPO application time, which is a certain kind of investor, and the actual interest a company will get on listing. They're two different people. So don't think that one implies the other.
Got it. Fair point.
So IPO investors in a way provide liquidity. उनका काम होता है डे वन पे कंपनी को छोड़ के आना पॉप पे या जो भी डिस्काउंट के साथ. उसके बाद there are different sort of investors who come in. Although it just makes a lot of sense to hold a few good companies. जैसे मैंने आपको बताया था, मेरे 2 स्टॉक लगे थे which I had sold on day one. Aeroflex and Vishnu Prakash Pungalia. Had I held them, they went 2x from where I sold them as well within a year. So again, different learnings every time. But with that, maybe we can go forward and talk about the third section. So maybe Vivek, now what we want to do is we have covered almost all the theory. So you want to get into practice of how to actually evaluate IPOs and what do we do per se. So before that, we'll start with a game where we would want you to guess. We'll show you a few snippets of a few companies and tell you and ask you, what do you think you would want to analyze in those further? Again, these are not good or bad examples. It's just that कि आप इसमें और क्या देखना चाहोगे basis the information which you find from these IPOs. And again, having said that, अब यहाँ से actually थोड़े नाम आने लगेंगे because we will be using a few examples. None of these are actually buy sell recommendations in any way. Just we are using a few examples from the past on what we think is relevant right now. So जैसे मैं ये आपको पहला example बताता हूँ. So अभी श्री अहिंसा नेचुरल्स का अभी IPO आया था like 10 days ago. So I have pasted in 2 different snippets. First snippet is about the objects of the issue कि वो क्या करना चाह रहे हैं. So it's saying that investment for setting up a manufacturing unit at Sawarda, Jaipur. And then second जो मैंने डाला है वो उसका capacity utilization snippet दूसरी जगह से उसके DRHP का. So आप capacity utilization देखोगे. So they are like in FY23, they were like 80%, FY24, 57%, and then H1 of FY25, they are like 46% उनकी capacity जो है वो currently utilized है. They are bringing their IPO. So anything which kind of catches your eye when you look at it at a high level.
वही capacity utilization तो बहुत कम है existing में.
Yeah, so that's the question which you ideally need to know कि यार जब तुम ऑलरेडी 50% कैपेसिटी पे यूज कर रहे हो तो तुम अगली यूनिट क्यों लगा रहे हो? लाइक करंटली तुम्हारी कैपेसिटी ऑप्टिमली यूटिलाइज नहीं है. सो हाउ वुड एडिंग मोर कैपेसिटी ऐड? दीज ऑल आर क्वेश्चंस व्हिच यू नीड टू फाइंड इन फ्रॉम व्हेन यू आर रीडिंग द DRHP एंड देन प्रोबेबली listen to some of the interviews to understand what is the promoter's vision. जैसे अब इसका मैं आपको नेक्स्ट एग्जांपल देता हूँ. ये करारो करके एक कंपनी आई थी.
मनीष, मुझे एक बात बताओ, ये जो आप क्वेश्चन पूछ रहे हो, सॉरी मैं बीच में इंटरप्ट कर दिया, ये कैसे पूछ सकते हैं प्रमोटर से?
सो देयर आर जूम कॉल्स वगैरह होती हैं, IPO रोड शोज होते हैं, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी व्हाट हैज हैपेंड इज जूम कॉल्स पे भी, जूम पे भी होते हैं वो कई सारे. सो यू कैन जॉइन अ लॉट ऑफ देम. यूट्यूब पे होते हैं, यूट्यूब लाइव में, तो आप वहां पे जाके अपना क्वेश्चन डाल सकते हो. देयर आर अ लॉट ऑफ PR कंपनीज हु डू दिस, IR कंपनीज.
ये मतलब अगर सपोज कोई भी प्रमोटर DRHP फाइल कर रखा है, IPO चल रहा है उसका, तो अगर मुझे उसको सपोज अपने शो में बुलाना है तो नहीं हो सकता ना, बिकॉज वो तो अलाउड नहीं है शायद.
So they can't give any future looking statement, but they can always tell you what they have filed in the DRHP. उसके related वो कोई भी information दे सकते हैं. So जैसे this is an obvious question which comes up कि भाई आपकी कैपेसिटी इतनी कम यूटिलाइज है तो आप नया प्लांट कैसे डालोगे. सो दे कांट से कि इससे मेरा ये रेवेन्यू हो जाएगा वो हो जाएगा, जो उन्हें डीआरएचपी में नहीं डाला है. सो नो मटेरियल इन्फॉर्मेशन can come out outside of DRHP, but what they've already included in DRHP is something which they can share, because of which DRHPs are so important that they are made right.
Point taken.
Got it. So जैसे अब मैं आपको ये नेक्स्ट एग्जांपल देता हूँ उसका, वेरी अपोजिट टू प्रोबेबली द लास्ट वन. सो एट अ हाई लेवल करारो इज डूइंग, करारो करके कंपनी है जो गियर्स एंड ट्रैक्टर के गियर्स एंड एक्सेल्स वगैरह बनाती है, इज डूइंग ओएफएस, ऑफर फॉर सेल, कंप्लीट फॉर ऑफर्स फॉर सेल है एट 1250 करोड़ का. और अगर आप इसकी कैपेसिटी यूटिलाइजेशन देखोगे तो इट्स ऑपरेटिंग समवेयर अराउंड 80, 81, 88% पर से. सो एनीथिंग विच स्ट्राइक्स आउट टू यू?
कभी कैपेसिटी यूटिलाइजेशन तो दिख ही रहा है कि कम हुआ है, ट्रेंड कम हुआ है इसका कैपेसिटी यूटिलाइजेशन का.
So, ये ऐसा हाँ. सो ऐसे जा रहा है 22, 23, 24, 22, 23, 24. So what is happening is in a manufacturing setup 85% कैपेसिटी यूटिल से ज्यादा अचीव करना तो बहुत मुश्किल है. सो इन अ वे दे आर ऑलरेडी ऑपरेटिंग एट मैक्स कैपेसिटी. तो अगर तुम मैक्स कैपेसिटी पे ऑपरेट कर रहे हो तो तुम को प्लांट बड़ा करना पड़ेगा, मशीनरी लगानी पड़ेगी इन ऑर्डर टू गेट मोर रेवेन्यूज, राइट? तो तुम ओएफएस क्यों कर रहे हो पूरा 1250 करोड़ का? एंड दिस इज अ क्वेश्चन व्हिच दे वर आस्क्ड in the pre-IPO interview as well, and they said that they will use internal accruals in order to do capex. But internal accruals की तो एक speed होगी, right? So, but compared to that, if you look at it, these are signs where you could probably find out कि यार ये और पता करना है या फिर इनसे related चीजें पता करनी है. Maybe with that, I will now hand it over to our professor to explain to you how to evaluate IPOs at a very high level in like 5-6 slides, and क्या क्या sections होते हैं IPOs के DRHP में, किस में क्या क्या देखना होता है.
ओके,
थैंक्स मनीष.
अच्छा एक मुझे बताओ ना, क्वेश्चन का आ गया माइंड में कि ये जो कैपेसिटी यूटिलाइजेशन ये लोग जो डेटा देता है, इस डेटा का क्या सैनिटी है? तो झूठ लिख सकता है क्या?
लिख सकते हैं.
So लिख तो सकते, but it is like audited. So if you trust the auditor, then it is
तो इसका
valid.
मतलब
उसमें
कौन
लिखा है.
ऑडिटर है वो भी डिपेंड करता है.
ये देखिए जैसे इसमें लिखा है एट सर्टिफाइड बाय अविनाश पवार चार्टेड इंजीनियर पर्सुएंट टू द सर्टिफिकेट डेटेड. नाउ इट डिपेंड्स ऑन कि आप इसको कितना बिलीव कर सकते हो. बट इसमें भी क्या होता है, ट्रिक्स होती हैं. जैसे आपको 24 घंटे की शिफ्ट दिखानी है, उस हिसाब से कैपेसिटी यूटिलाइजेशन दिखानी है, या फिर 14 घंटे की शिफ्ट के हिसाब से कैपेसिटी यूटिलाइजेशन दिखानी. सो देयर आर वेज टू बी एबल टू अंडरस्टूड हाउ टू गेम इट. सो इट वोंट बी outrightly wrong. Like you will have to understand कि अगर किसी ने यहाँ लिखा है because it is a RHP, so it would be right, but they would have gamed the definition of it a bit maybe.
ओके, तो ये जो
थोड़ी विंडो ड्रेसिंग हो सकती है.
इन्होंने जो सर्टिफिकेशन दिया अविनाश पवार ने, ये इस डॉक्यूमेंट के साथ अटैच करना पड़ता है क्या?
वो सभी को देना पड़ता है, बट फॉर अस इट्स नॉट अवेलेबल.
वो डीआरएचपी का पार्ट नहीं बनता है?
थोड़े केसेस में बनता है जहां पे वो कहते हैं ना, वो कंपनी से बहुत ज्यादा रिलेटेड हो ना. फॉर एग्जांपल कई बार क्या होता है, आपके वॉल्यूम, प्रोडक्शन के वॉल्यूम्स अलग होते हैं, रेवेन्यू अलग होता है, यूटिलाइजेशन अलग होता है. सो दैट टाइम अपने को समझ आ जाता है कि यहाँ पे कुछ तो दिक्कत है. एंड यू नो इन वेरी स्मॉल कंपनीज इट इज वेरी ऑफन कि सिर्फ आपको वो बनाना है स्टेटमेंट, इसलिए आप कुछ भी उसको पैचअप करके दिखा रहे हो. बट इन आई वुड से मेजोरिटी ऑफ मेन बोर्ड्स द नंबर्स है जेन्युइन, बट एसएमईज में कई बार दिक्कतें होती है. एंड वन मोर थिंग इज कि ये जो होता है कि इसका इस स्टेटमेंट का जो बैकएंड में एक स्टेटमेंट होता है कि इसका आपने कैसे वेरिफिकेशन करवाया, दैट इज गिवन टू द रेगुलेटर. एंड इफ द रेगुलेटर आस्क्स कि आपको इसका क्लैरिफिकेशन देना पड़ेगा, सो वो उसका क्लैरिफिकेशन सेबी को प्राइवेटली देता है. सो दैट्स नॉट अवेलेबल फॉर अस.
तो इसीलिए जो डीआरएचपी का पूरा प्रोसेस है, इट्स अ लेंथी प्रोसेस बिकॉज रेगुलेटर विल डू लॉट ऑफ टू एंड फ्रो, राइट? दे वांट टू वेट ऑल द डेटा व्हिच हैज बीन गिवन. या ओके, या यस प्रोफेसर सर,
You can move to the next slide. Cool. So I'll try and make this as informative and hopefully engaging as possible. And I'll not get into too much detail. I'll try to use more examples. But this is how we have learned how to evaluate a company. Now, to start with, we obviously have the RHP, the red herring prospectus. I'll cover that subsequently. But apart from the RHP also, like Manish was saying, there are other places in which you will also get some information, which is very important for you to get that well-rounded information. I think the first one is the interviews that the company gives. This might be via roadshows. If you're in some of these WhatsApp groups, you will get links to it. Company also publishes this in certain places. And the big companies, let's say a main board IPO, this is Acme Solar, it's just a random example. This company would have an interview with all the major news channels. It will have it in Hindi, it's Z Business, it'll have it with CNBC Awaaz, it'll have it with CNBC, it'll have it at NDTV. All of these interviews will be available for you to read and to gauge, what they want to do with the funds, how the management looks, how confident they are, to get some of the soft factors, plus of course what the business wants to do. So I think this is a crucial step. Without these interviews, you cannot do anything. Today, the good thing is, even in the SME segment, like I'd say 2 years ago, hardly any SMEs used to give this. Main boards, more or less, you'll get in 95% of the cases, you'll get this. In SMEs now, today, I'd say 50-60% of the SMEs are also doing this in some way or form. Either a small closed group roadshow, or you will have some channels. In fact, we ourselves on Sunday Investing do, bring on some promoters to talk about their business. So it's very good if, there is full transparency and the promoter is also, open to, being out there and putting himself out, right? At the end of the day, he's running a public company. The next thing that you should always look at is the company website. Look at, any kind of public databases. People often in the RHP, you will not get the names of the clients. The clients will not have gotten the approval to put the names there. But if you go to their website, all their clients will be listed. And you will automatically know, okay, are they working with trusted companies, trusted partners or not? Same way people look at, things like EPFO data, which is the speed with which the company's employees are growing. Now, you may have data only up to a certain point. You may have data up to, say, 6 months ago or 5 months ago, but you will get a sense on the trend of the company. So you don't just have to look at the RHP, will obviously come to that, but there are sources over and above that. The last thing is probably the network, which is really, really important, I think, especially for retail investors, right? People like us in this room. We don't always have a direct line of access to the promoter himself, right? To get a feel of, is the promoter genuine? Is the promoter ambitious? To sort of do a background check on these guys. But there are, of course, others who do have that. And that's where I think building a little bit of a network is really important, having access to some of these funds, these small funds, some of these UHNIs who also invest in these in this space, and just making sure that everything is above board. Things are checking out, and there is a undercurrent, there is a vibe that is positive for this company that is building. I think that is another important thing you need to do before you actually invest. Now I'll come to the RHP itself, which is probably the most important thing. And I'd say 80-90% of what you need to know about a company you will get here. The rest will come through these interviews and so on. Now, the first time I read an RHP, when I looked at it, just scared me. I was like, I can never read this 400-page document. So many words. It's such small font. How am I ever going to go through this? Probably the first RHP actually read most of it. You'll eventually realize that you don't have to do that. But a typical RHP is divided into a few key sections. This is a subset of those sections where I would say you get 90% of what you need to know. You have the business, which is what the company actually does. You have the objects of the issue, which is why they are raising funds. You have the risk factors, which will help you determine how, what can go wrong with this company. You have the numbers, which is the financials, which is, of course, probably the single most important thing. And then there are a bunch of other small things, which on a case-to-case basis you will look at. But even if you look at the top 4 things, you will get a 90% understanding of any company, and you will probably looking at 30 to 40 pages. And a lot of it is, you'll see that it kind of repeats, the same information will come again and again. You can, once you are practiced, you can go through an RHP in 30 minutes. What may have taken you 2 hours, 3 hours, just the RHP part to get the main idea, understanding about the company should not take you more than 30 minutes. And then you will dig deep. You will see if you're interested, not interested. If you're not interested, you'll probably not even, look ahead. So it's very important to not be scared of this document. This document is a very, very valuable document, which once you master, you can look at it very, very quickly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Rohit, just one quick check with you.
Yeah.
There are a lot of AI platforms. I mean, the notebook.llm is one of the most used one these days. So do you think value in using it for this purpose, or you still are old school and want to read every text?
So it is very helpful. I have also used it quite a bit. There are some things it doesn't do very well, which I'll kind of cover in some of the 2-3 things that I'll show you, right? Like it doesn't pick money numbers of tables. It doesn't do certain calculations that are very helpful. So you can't do away without it. I mean, you can use it as a supplement, but you will still have to open that RHP and look at it and make up your own mind at the end of the day.
Fair point.
Yeah. So this is probably the first, and this is the section you will start with, which is what does the company do? This is an example of the company that we saw earlier, Acme Solar. I took this example because when this company first came, it was another solar company. I think Vari Energies, Premier Energies, both are solar module manufacturers, had come just before that. When you just look at Acme Solar, you think, okay, it's one more company like Vari. But when you actually dig deep, you realize, okay, the solar business itself is broken into so many different segments. You have the solar module manufacturers, the Vari Premiers of the world. You have the EPC players, of which there have been so many. Vari Renewables itself is one that is doing so well, and so many in the SME segment. And there's actually a third segment. This is in the IPP segment, which is the independent power producer. If you read this, you will understand, okay, these are the segments that are there in the solar space. This is a different business. This has to be evaluated differently, and you need to understand this company. You will, if you read the 2 pages of the our business section, you will understand that this is what this company does. And that is probably the most important thing, right? That's the first thing you want to start with. So the first thing I do at least is just go straight to the our business section and read the first couple of pages and understand what they actually do. The second thing that you get from this section are the metrics. Now, metrics could be things like revenue and so on, some of these top line numbers. But I think very importantly is also some of the KPIs. Over here, you can see some examples of some of the KPIs, which could be the capacity of bids they've participated in, how much was allocated, how much was quoted, etc. What is their win percentage? If you take let's say a hotel example, you will have metrics like say the RevPAR, which is the revenue per average room rate, the occupancy rate. Like for every segment, it will be different, but it's very important for you to understand those metrics. And in the RHP, they actually compare these metrics with their peers. So you can automatically see in the RHP, okay, for this hotel, this is my occupancy rate, this is my average revenue rate, this is my growth, etc. And in the same table, you will see this for the 12 other listed hotels companies. So you don't even have to do that work. You have to go and search for each one. It's all given to you. So that is the second thing that you look at, which is the business metrics. The next 2-3 things depend on the sector and the company, but broadly you'll be looking at what are their sort of key projects, key clients, or key ongoing. Let's say if it's a hotels company, what are the main hotels that they are running? You will look at things like their order book, which is very important in the capital goods space. I think people look at a book to bill ratio. That is something that you will get here. You will see the capacity utilization. Again, you determine if they're able to utilize the capacity. If they're raising some funds, how much will the capacity increase? And for this capacity, what potential revenue is possible? And then there are a bunch of soft factors, which will be what is their right to win? What is their actual growth strategy? Again, if you take a First Cry, for example, like they would talk about all the stores that they're intending to add and say they're raising some money. Okay, over the next 3 years, they plan to add so many stores. So you can also do a math. Okay, one store gives this much revenue. If they do successfully do what they're saying, this is how much the business could grow by. So you'll get a good idea of what the business does, what is the differentiators of the business, and what are things that you need to look for. If you were to spend maybe 15-20 minutes in this section, you'll have a very good starting point on whether you want to go ahead with this company. Are you interested in this company still or not? And if you are, then you can move to the next section. Manish, is there anything you want to add on this, or should I?
No, you can continue.
I'll give another example. We had a company, this is a very specific example of that art business section where you might see something that is a bit unique. There's an SME company, it's a listed company, it's been listed for a while, called Atmasco. Now, when this company came, if you look at their art business section, initially it will look like, okay, this is an EPC company. But in this section, there was also one entire piece on how they were getting into the defense segment, which is based on a subsidiary that they had and some capex that they were putting into that and so on. If you were to just look at what Atmasco did on Chittorgarh or on any website that kind of summarizes what that business does, okay, it is another EPC player, they have a certain niche, they go after a certain segment, etc. But if you read the RHP, and this information is right here, you suddenly realize that the story is not just this, but they actually have a very unique thing. They have certain licenses for, say, bulletproof jackets that nobody else in the listed space has. So, okay, there is something more here. This is not just another EPC player. Let me look a little bit more, right? So those are things that you will get when you look at this segment, this section. You can move to the next slide, Manish. So now you've understood the business. The next thing you want to do is know why they're raising the money. Typically, there are 3 reasons why any company will raise money, and then there is a fourth, which I will club into another. First is just they want to expand. This could be for new capacity, via new capacity expansion, or some kind of, say, store expansion in the case of retail, for example, like that First Cry example. So this is a very easy, like I've just put a very simple example from an SME, because in SMEs, this tends to be very simple. But this was from a company called Alpex Solar, which came last year in 24, actually, FY24, saying that they are raising this money to take the capacity from 450 megawatt to 1200 megawatt. It's very simple to understand. 450 megawatt, they were doing X revenue. As per them, they will take this at 1200 megawatt. They have the demand for it. If they were to execute and not sort of botch execution, they can triple their revenue with this capacity expansion. Forget the practicalities of what the running the business is. Just this is what they're raising the money. The ask and this thing is very simple. It's very easy to measure. After a few months, Alpex Solar gave a notification to the exchange saying that they have completed their expansion and they are now capable to do 1200. Very simple, but very easy for you to see why the money is being used. The second and probably the most common reason that money gets raised is for working capital. Now, one thing with especially true for SMEs, little less in main boards. Main boards, you'll see a higher mix of OFS, lesser fresh issue. In SME, you largely see fresh issue only. And for most of these guys, the thing that unlocks for them is working capital, which is they have some kind of, if they want to grow fast, they're not necessarily cash flow generating, or there will be some reason for them, maybe the government, they have to pay the government, or they get money from the government late, some kind of working capital need which they need to solve for, which if unlocked can show growth for them. One very interesting thing here, and one of the places our Notebook LM fails, is in making a calculation of how this company believes their business will grow going forward. Now, a company is not allowed to give a guidance, right? I think we just discussed that now. They're not allowed. SEBI doesn't allow them to give forward-looking statements. However, if they have calculated working capital or given working capital as a reason, you have to show what is that working capital need, which means for FY25, FY26, FY27, let's say for next 3 years, you have a need for working capital. You need to show how much that is. That might be 20 crore, 30 crore, 40 crore, because you're raising that money. And when you do that, you automatically actually give a guidance, because you're saying if I have this much working capital, it implies a certain amount of revenue, top line, right? So by looking at this segment, this section, you can actually calculate and tell how much this company thinks it is going to grow for the next 3 years. This is a calculation again from a SME, because it was an easy calculation. There's a company called WTI Cabs that basically said that for FY24, this had come in towards the end of FY24. For FY24, they think that their receivable days will be 90. Their total receivables will be around 100 crore. From that, they will not say that we will do 400 crore in revenue, because they're not allowed to say that. But they will say that they have 100 crore of receivables, 90 days of this thing. So you multiply by 4, roughly 365 by 90, let's say 4x, and you have 400 crore. So you know that in FY24, there's a good chance WTI Cabs will do 400 crore in top line. You can then extrapolate this for all the subsequent years that, let's say, they publish in the RHP, and you have a sense, okay, WTI thinks they will go 30, 40% year on year. So you as an investor know, okay, this is how much they're projecting, and this is likely, of course, execution is different, but at least you know you're going after a company that wants to grow 40% year on year, 15% year on year, 100% year on year, and so on. This is an example where, to the dot, this company, when they gave their numbers, they hit exactly this number. They were supposed to do 400 crore, they did 401 crore. So this is the second reason, and why, if AI hasn't solved this yet, maybe it will soon. But this is a good way to get guidance without getting guidance. The third thing is debt repayment. This is a very simple thing. People raise money to pay off a certain amount of debt. That leads to a straight bottom line accrual. Let's say someone has 100 crore debt. He's going to pay that off. Depending on the interest rate, that could mean an 8 to 9 crore per year savings in your PAT, improvement in PAT, which means you can give it a multiple. I've seen many people who just subtract that debt amount and give a multiple based on that, because from next year, that money is going to come into their pocket, right? So these are the 3 main reasons and you can use all of these to get a sense on how to value this company, get a sense on the growth, on the future prospects of this company, at least based on what is given in the RHP. Apart from this, there are a bunch of small things. You'll have companies that come for acquisitions. The company that Manish was saying, or maybe Tanmay, I don't remember, that Quality Power, which is the last main board issue that came. The reason for their fundraise was to complete an acquisition where they, I think, had a certain percentage stake in the company, and they were taking it to 100%, or maybe they were taking it to 51%. I don't remember now. But the entire object of the issue was for this acquisition. This is also a very interesting one where that the money, they will declare the numbers of the acquired company also. And that from next year, the acquisition will also start, adding into the revenues here. So it might not look that cheap right now, but the moment you add the acquisition and you add it for the full year, the numbers will suddenly look that much better. Remember, there was this company, Bansal Wires also, which had a very similar thing. It looked very, very expensive if you didn't account for this. But the moment you accounted for that, suddenly the following year looked very, very cheap. So, and those are places where retailers will say, "Acha, P is 100 for last year." But उसमें से ये acquisition हुआ है, 2 महीने या 3 महीने का ही acquisition का numbers है. The moment you project it for FY25, suddenly with the full year, it is very different. So, but yeah, these are the typical things you look for, and these are the cues you take on, whether to value this company in a certain way or in a different way.
So basically, you are saying that 1 year forward PE, if numbers are looked at correctly, we will get an insight. We will be able to
100%.
तो थोड़ा सा fine print पढ़ना पड़ेगा उसके लिए.
100%. And I think all the clues are there in this document. You will, if you stop looking backward, start looking just slightly forward. You don't have to look very forward also. It's very difficult for an IPO investor to look through 2-3 years down the line. You're often looking at, ठीक है, अभी का भी FY25 क्या होगा? Like even now, the companies that have listed are not giving you FY25 numbers. But there's a lot of information in the RHP that will tell you what this company will do.
Got it.
Just one pointer here. Working capital calculations are not always correct. So it also depends on the quality of LMs. कि जो LM है जिसने वो DRHP बनाया है, because promoter क्या होगा, वो LM के साथ बैठ के DRHP बनाएगा. LMs at a lot of times will have a lot of IPOs churning. So वो क्या है, बस डाल देंगे एक number, and this is also important to make sure that you understand the quality of that LM and वो कैसा DRHP बनाने के लिए जाना जाता है, because उस हिसाब से आप बता पाओगे कि उसने बस नंबर इंपोर्ट कर दिया किसी एनालिस्ट ने बैठ के, या फिर बिजनेस ने एक्चुअली बैठ के समझा है कि वहां पे कितना कैपिटल चाहिए होगा.
इंटरेस्टिंग.
और एक चीज हम चेक करते हैं कभी-कभी is you check if there is a difference in their working capital calculations from the DRHP and the RHP. Often the DRHP say filed 6 months ago and this is filed 6 months later. Is there a change in that number? If there is a change in the number, it is often very good, which means that someone has looked at it. There has been an update based on how the business has performed. Sometimes it will be the same 6-month-old ka chipkao number. And then you'll get a sense based on what they've done in H1. Suddenly the full year is not looking likely to be like that. Then there may be some jhol. So you can do a lot of these little things, but theek hai, those are things you'll pick up as you keep looking at businesses and as you keep analyzing. You'll start looking for those small things.
तो ये जितने LMs है जो बहुत ज्यादा IPO किए हुए हैं, उनसे दूर रहना चाहिए फिर उनके डॉक्यूमेंट्स को.
Maybe I can add a point. I don't think, and again, this is a question which multiple times comes up, and we also say कि ये LM का IPO generally अच्छे होते हैं, but from what I have seen, it is there's zero correlation between companies and LMs. In the long term, in short term, there will be volatility. In short term, because markets act as a weighing machine, voting machine. In the long term, they'll act as weighing machine. So in the long term, I don't think companies and LMs are directly correlated unless you take out the top two or bottom two. Top two would do very good, bottom two will do very bad, and then the medium, any company can do well in the long term depending on how the performance is. But I'm sure different people will have different opinions on this.
Also would like to add a point here. कभी कभी क्या होता है कि जो क्वालिटी ऑफ DRHP या RHP होता है, मतलब पर्सनली मेजॉरिटी ऑफ, सपोज मैंने RHP खोला तो मैं पहले 5 मिनट में पता लगा लेता हूँ, मतलब दिस इज व्हाट माय गट फीलिंग सेज कि यार ये क्या, सपोज द RHP इज वेरी बैड, इन अ वेरी बैड शेप, तो मेरे को एक अंदर से गट फीलिंग ऐसा आता है कि यार इफ अ प्रमोटर रियली लव्स हिज कंपनी ही शुड हैव एक्चुअली फायर्ड द LM इटसेल्फ कि ये क्या करा है तूने. तो देयर आर मेनी केसेस जहां पे SME में देयर आर सो पुअर क्वालिटी ऑफ आरएचपी, जहाँ पे टेबल्स को लिटरली सब वर्टिकली होने के बाद बीच में हॉरिजॉन्टल टेबल्स डाल दिया। अब इन्वेस्टर ऐसे तो पढ़ेगा नहीं, तो ये चीजें तो उन्हें देखना चाहिए था।
सही बात है।
Okay, you can move. Yeah. So the third thing, this I'll just cover very quickly. Tanmay will also cover this in a subsequent slide. Is I think the risk factors. Here, I'll just say that you need to know, when you know what a business is about. Like, let's take the Acme Solar example. It is an IPP business. What is the single most important risk for this company is that purchasing power agreement. Now, they have signed half their purchasing power agreements. They are supposed to have signed the other half, but they have not yet done that. If it remains unsigned, that is a real risk. So you do need to know. It's like part of understanding the business. The thing here is you have to look at the top, I would say 9 to 10 risks. There'll typically be 50 risks. 30 risks will be the same risks in every RHP. It'll be some, general COVID will come and some, very, very generic kind of risks. But the first 15 to 20, and I'd say the first 10 risks are the key risks, which are super specific to this company. You need to skim those. Even there'll be a supplier concentration risk. There'll be a demand concentration risk. Whatever it is, they'll say there's demand concentration or supplier concentration. That may be the nature of the industry, but it will be called out as a risk. And then you just have to decide if that is, mostly it's not that big a risk. Sometimes you'll have a case where one client is 90% of the revenue, 80% of the revenue. Those you've got to see. But if you go to the first 8, 9, you will be there. You won't really have to look beyond that. Litigation is a very common one. Again, litigation generally tends to be in the top 2, 3. This is an example of an SME where I think the raise was for 100 crore, 120 crore or something. And there was an 80 crore litigation risk on the group. Now, okay, you can say the group might figure it out from somewhere else, but this is the one listed entity that they have. You don't know what they can do in case something goes wrong, right? This litigation is so large, it may not lead to anything. It might be a frivolous litigation, but at least you look at it and say, okay, I mean, there are 300 companies to choose from, say, at any point in time or any IPO in a year. Based on your risk profile, you decide whether you want to take this risk on. So like this, there are a few different risks. I'll not spend more time. Tanmay will cover 1, 2 things later as well. This is probably the bit that, people, you get a hang, you get a knack of looking at this as time goes. So I would say keep at this. This financials is probably the most important piece, because you want to understand if the numbers that people are giving are genuine or not. Now, people keep talking, acha, they've IPO aa gaya, suddenly the PAT margins have improved. It's very common to see the margins improve before the IPO. IPO ke baad sab gir jayega. So that is what you need to try and understand. Do the numbers look genuine or not? Do their cash flows look genuine or not? And that is what we are also trying to this thing, and I try and cover that here with 1, 2 examples. But broadly, you're looking at things like revenue, growth. These are generally not things that you can fudge. There are some examples, like I've seen, where you might have a related party transaction on the revenue. And then if you look at the numbers of the related party, you'll see that the related party is stuck with stock. There was an example recently, an IPO that came. It's an SME called Amble. Company looked quite good, but it was selling 100% of its revenue to a single related party. So it was able to show sales at its end. But if you looked at the ROC data of that partner was stuck with inventory. So the inventory was piling on there, which means the products weren't actually selling. So those kind of things can happen, but those are rare. Generally, revenue is decent quality, and you can get a sense of revenue and growth. You also want to see, obviously, the margins. You will generally try and compare this with other peers and see if it is broadly in line. And you'll also look at the key cost items and see if anything has changed, up or down. And I'll kind of cover that a little bit later also. But you're broadly checking if the margins look okay. And one thing over here is, I know I also mentioned this just now, that people come in an IPO year with fantastic margins. There is also a kind of structural reason for that. That is not just that they want to get the best, valuation. A lot of these companies, let's say 3 years ago, you had no idea you wanted to go for an IPO. Now, last year you decided, okay, things are going well, business is going well. I want to list and I want to grow. Till 2 years ago, you were probably showing very thin margins. Because it just makes sense, right? You pay less tax, you're kind of taking what you need from the business as and when you need it. You're running it almost like a proprietorship kind of firm.
True.
But as you professionalize, and as you, of course, know that you want to get, the best value for your company, a lot of those costs will go away and your P&L will start reflecting a more normal business.
Yeah.
I think that also happens. So it is unfair to just look at every company and say, "Acha, ye galat hai." This is where the comparing with peers is, I think, the best thing to just check if is there a reason, structural reason why this guy is so. If he's very far away from his peers, SMEs. There's an example for SMEs. Main boards are a little different. But SMEs also have very thin cost structures in general. So if you look at, let's say, the salary a promoter will take in an SME, he might actually take only a 10 lakh salary, whereas the entire management team of a similar, maybe a 3x larger main board will probably be 10, 15 crores. That itself can lead to a huge difference in the margin, in the EBITDA margin of the company. So there are some structural reasons also why you may have better margins, but as long as nothing is looking out of whack, the gross margins look fine, the EBITDA margins look within a range, there's no reason to doubt for the sake of doubting. The next piece is, of course, the cash flows, which I will just cover in the next slide. But apart from that, you look at a few key balance sheet items. You're looking at whether they have very high borrowings. You're looking at their receivables as a percentage of sales. Is that high? If it is high, is that in line with an industry or not? Which is also a very important thing. There's an example where in the water EPC space, it is very common to have 3 months, 4 months of receivables, because there is this concept of retention money. So it's nothing unusual people will look at the receivables, it's so high, but it's normal. In fact, this particular example was even better than the listed peers. You will also look at things like inventory, how large is inventory as a percentage of their overall sales. That depends on the sectors. If for jewelry, it's very common to have a lot of inventory. So you will have to look at it sector by sector. And I think there are some other interesting little tidbits you look for. So this other income is a very specific thing that you need to make sure you look at. This is an example of a company that just listed a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I think, called Super Iron Foundry. They suddenly had a 9 crore PAT in H1 of this year. Now, the reason for that is they had a 7 crore gain from sale of plant and machinery, which I highlighted over here. Now, if you look at their core, this thing, it will just show as other income. When you go into the notes, you will see, of that 7 is just this one-time thing. Now, there were many people who were looking at, if you take 9 crore and multiply by 18 crore, uska PAT leke, say 14, 15 crore, jo bhi PAT, I don't remember, uspe the company is coming at 12 times, 15 times. But if you take their true PAT, if you remove one time, it was coming at 40 times. And you can see that the market has absolutely hammered this company after listing. It's been one of the most brutal falls I've seen, like, for a company after listing. So this is a very simple thing that you can spot if you just know what you're looking for. So these are a few things to look at when you're looking at the numbers. This cash flow piece is also very important. Now, there are so many different ways in which companies can show positive cash flows, but it is relatively harder to fudge cash flow. There are probably only 2-3 ways to do it. And one of them, the example on the right, is a company where they've taken a lot of short-term borrowings. And they have firstly included short-term borrowings in their cash flow. They shouldn't include in their operating cash flow. They have done that and shown that their cash generated in the last year in 24 is positive. If you can see, they show 17 crore of positive cash. Of that, 23 crore or 24 crore is just coming from short-term borrowings. So this is an example of, when you look at the number, it looks good, but there is a questionable reason why that is looking good. Now, if you have the opportunity to ask the promoters, you definitely should, so that you know why this number looks like this. Whereas in, say, a strong cash flow company, you might have when you determine, okay, over here, let's say payables have increased. When you ask the promoters about this, they tell you that our negotiation power has improved because there is so much supply, there is so much demand and so little supply. I am able to pay my vendors later. So that kind of comparison, it is important for you to identify what could be different in the cash flows and somehow get an answer to why something is good or something is bad. So I've just given these two very specific examples. We've seen many variations of the same thing where companies will still be able to somewhat fudge their cash flow statement also. But if you get a good positive operating cash flow company, that is very, very rare, in this market. There are very few exceptions, at least in the Indian market, where you'll have these kind of strong metrics to show. You can move to so this last bit, I'll just tell one, two things and I'll hand it to Tanmay. But broadly, apart from these 4 sections, you're looking for 2, 3 small things. You're looking for, one is obviously you need to know the promoters and their backgrounds. You'll occasionally have very high quality qualified promoters. That's a very, very good green flag for me. This is an example of a small company that listed where the promoter was the CFO of Tata Agri. And that is rare to get a small company where you have a promoter, with that kind of caliber and that kind of background. The second thing that we often look at, and this is especially true for small retail investors, is you look at who are the pre-IPO investors. And the pre-IPO investors, the quality of that gives you some comfort कि promoter ka background check is good. That's probably the only thing you're getting from there. But if, say, Negan has invested in this company, this is an example of Grand Continent Hotels, which is just listed, maybe a week, 10 days ago. If Negan, which is a very high quality investor, has invested, that means they have done their check on the promoters. You can check on the business. You can believe in the business to make your own call, but it's very hard for you to, okay, is this person of high quality? And the fact that they have come again and again and backed this company multiple times, like in multiple rounds, means that the promoter is of a high quality. So that at least you get that comfort.
बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग डिस्कशन हो रहा है, कंटेंट बड़ा मजा आ रहा है, लेकिन मुझे लगता है मैं जस्टिफाई नहीं करूंगा अगर हम पार्ट 2 नहीं बनाएंगे तो, बिकॉज मुझे लगता है ये पार्ट 1 के लिए बहुत अच्छा था, बट आई विल रिक्वेस्ट यू गाइस कि एक पार्ट 2 भी करते हैं, क्योंकि अभी तन्मय को सुनना बाकी है, यश को सुनना बाकी है, शायद मनीष भी थोड़ा और बोलेंगे, तो दिस डिजर्व्स अनदर पार्ट. सो पार्ट 1 के लिए आई थिंक इसको कंक्लूड करते हैं एंड लेट्स प्लान पार्ट 2 जब भी आप लोग अवेलेबल है, एंड वी टेक द डिस्कशन फॉरवर्ड. क्या बोलते हैं?
Yes.
Good. Look forward.
परफेक्ट,
Sure.
लवली, मजा आया. मनीष, रोहित, तन्मय, यश, मोर देन एनीथिंग एल्स यार, तुम लोग मेरे को इंस्पायर बहुत कर रहे हो. एज अ 45-year-old पर्सन आई फील लाइक अमेजिंग यार, कितना कुछ करना बाकी है अभी, एक DRHP में जाना, इतना कुछ निकालना, अमेजिंग. तो करते हैं और फर्दर डिस्कशन. थैंक यू सो मच फॉर दिस पार्ट 1 एंड विल सी यू अगेन in part 2. All right?
Thank you, Vivek.
Thank
Look forward to it.
Investments in the securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.